A young man's eyes shot open with a horrifying realization. Kneeling on the floor, shirtless and clutching his head, he wondered if this was reincarnation. Visions of a magical sword and a powerful orb flashed through his mind as he contemplated his favorite game, resolving to find an answer. This was the world he knew so well, a fantasy of swords, magic, and romance. He had been reborn into his favorite game, Dungeon Brave Soul, where a new life was about to begin before Grand Academy. The date was April 5th in the Slayer year 101. Crowds of new students gathered before the academy for the entrance ceremony day. However, this entire world was contained within a screen. In another reality, the young man, wearing headphones, pumped his fist in excitement, ready for his 40-second playthrough. The game's characters chatted on screen, one admitting she was scared of the exam results. He took a drink, completely absorbed. No matter how many times he played, he never tired of it. This game, Yandere, was the sole reason he could endure the drudgery of his bleak workplace. What set it apart from a regular RPG was the ability to deepen bonds with the heroines and become their lovers, a feature that often left the game's protagonist flustered and surrounded. The game progressed to a pivotal moment. Inside a grand hall, an instructor stepped forward to announce the top performers of the entrance exam as the students watched intently. His face lit up with a grin. He leaned closer to the screen, filled with anticipation for the part he knew was coming. Surrounded by snacks and empty cans in his cluttered room, he knew this announcement would introduce the four main people of the story. And there, on the screen, the first two were revealed. Shell Uranus, 5th place in the exam, a mage, and Nagisa Saikai, 4th place, a swordsman. The game's introduction continues, presenting another of its heroines, Aerith Centria, who placed 3rd in the entrance exam and begins her journey as a cleric. Following her is the game's central hero, Leon Praise. He is the top student of his class, a spellblade by trade, and the descendant of a legendary hero. The core of the game's narrative involves guiding Leon, building relationships with the heroines, and ultimately confronting the Demon King. Beyond this main path, the world is filled with a vast number of side quests and events. While most are known, rumors persist of undiscovered secrets, making exploration a key part of the experience. The gamer, captivated, reflects on the game's stunningly beautiful graphics and how the heroines' appearances can change as the story progresses. But he knows the biggest reason for the game's immense popularity is something else entirely. It's the fact that the game was rated for adults. He grins, controller clattering in his hands, at the realization that the game allows the player to build a harem. Even so, the game's romantic elements are not always intense. The process of building intimacy with the heroines is often portrayed as genuinely heart-melting. The highly successful game was adapted into anime, manga, and other merchandise. An all-ages version was even released, with a more explicit content removed. Players were thrilled with the original's perfect balance of serious role-playing mechanics and its romantic, adult-oriented themes. Back in his room, surrounded by energy drinks and merchandise, the gamer winces in pain, having stayed up too long. His exhaustion is momentarily forgotten as he gestures wildly at his shelves, filled with figurines, proclaiming that, of course, he owns it all. But his energy fades as quickly as it came. He collapses onto his desk, staring at the game. He laments that despite his dedication, he's never reached this particular part of the story before. The exhaustion is overwhelming. He lay sprawled on a floor cushion, his head and shoulders disappearing under the low table littered with the remnants of his gaming session. Utterly spent, he closed his eyes, deciding to just sleep for a little while. A young man with dark hair and a long, flowing coat stands before an ornate building, his hands in his pockets. He poses a question, his tone laced with disdain. What game do you dislike? He begins to describe a particular game, Dungeon Brave Soul 2. In this sequel, a character who was nameless in the first installment, Xenon, becomes the new protagonist. The story is set after the original hero, Leon, has already sealed the Demon King. The premise, he continues, is that the player assumes the role of this new character, Xenon. Within the game's story, Xenon approaches Leon and the heroines, becoming a troublesome friend and forming a party with them. However, the situation gradually begins to change. The heroines start to distance themselves from Leon, leaving him increasingly isolated. The reason for their abandonment becomes terrifyingly clear. Xenon was systematically stealing the heroines away. He sits with a cruel, triumphant smirk upon a pile of the defeated young women. As a result, Leon finds himself utterly alone and cornered, forced to watch as Xenon, with a predatory grin, violates one of the heroines. He is shown the horrific sight, his expression shattering with shock as the young woman cries out in agony. The hero's composure breaks completely. He screams, his voice raw with anguish, pleading for the torment to stop. His desperate plea unanswered, Leon reaches a hand forward. Tears stream down his face, but his eyes hold a new, desperate resolve as dark energy begins to swirl around him. He, driven to utter despair, unleashes the seal of the Demon King. With the great chains shattered, Leon walks alone into the gaping maw of a dark cavern. The consequence of this final, desperate act is absolute. The world ends in a blinding, cataclysmic explosion. This is the conclusion to the story. The heart-stirring tale of love and adventure had become a dark and grotesque game. It is precisely for this reason that the young man despises Yandere 2 and vows to never engage with it again. His vehement thoughts fade as he becomes aware of a new sensation. His hand reaching out to touch a cool, ornately patterned surface. He opens his eyes in confusion, wondering where he is. This is not his room. Looking down, he is startled to see a slim, muscular torso that is not his own. His gaze sweeps across the surroundings, confirming his disorientation. It is an incredibly luxurious and spacious room, unlike anything he has ever seen. He moves toward a large, gilded mirror hanging on the far wall, his reflection slowly coming into view. As the image sharpens, he stops short, startled by the face staring back at him. His mind struggles to process the sight. He questions what he is seeing, unable to recognize the intense, dark-haired man in the reflection. The horrifying realization crashes down upon him. He clutches his head and shouts the name of the one person he hates most in Yandere, Zenon Baskerville. He collapses to his knees, shirtless and slick with sweat, his hands digging into his hair as the world seems to fracture around him. A single desperate question screams through his mind. What's happening? The horrifying truth settles upon him, a cold and undeniable certainty. This is his story now, the story of a man reincarnated not as a hero, but as the very villain he despised in his favorite game. His new life has begun, and what will become of him is a terrifying unknown. A young man awakens with a gasp, sweat beading on his brow. He stares at his reflection in an ornate mirror, his hands pressed against the glass. A horrifying realization dawns on him. The face staring back is that of Zenon Baskerville, the protagonist of the game Dungeon Brave Soul 2, and the one person in that world he despises above all others. His mind flashes back to his previous life, a gamer in a cluttered room, controller and headphones cast aside as he decided to sleep for a bit. He clutches his head in disbelief, questioning why, of all the possibilities, he was fated to be reincarnated into this specific man. He recalls Zenon's reputation as a man who preys on women, a villain of the highest order. He wonders what terrible deeds he must have committed in a past life to be cursed with such a reincarnation. Crouching in despair, he laments his fate. If he had to be reborn anyway, he would have infinitely preferred to become the story's true protagonist, Leon, who is always surrounded by his loyal companions. His thoughts are cut short by the sound of a door opening. A young maid enters the room, carrying fresh linens. She startles upon seeing him awake and immediately apologizes for entering without permission. He stares at her, demanding to know who she is. The maid bows deeply, her voice trembling as she explains. She insists that she knocked, but when he didn't wake up, she had no choice but to enter. She begs him to forgive her rudeness and her untidy appearance, stating she will accept any punishment. He recoils in utter shock. The concept of being punished for such a minor infraction is completely alien to him, and her fearful submission is deeply unsettling. To his horror, the maid turns and presents her back, stating that she is prepared for her usual punishment. The faint scars visible on her skin send a tremor through him. He realizes with dawning dread that the real Zenon must have been committing violence against her on a daily basis. An internal battle rages within him. A dark impulse, likely a remnant of Zenon's nature, urges him to strike her, but he fights it down. He tells her he won't punish her and orders her to put on her clothes. To sound convincing, he adds a threat, warning that the usual Zenon would have struck her at least 10 times for this, and that she shouldn't make him repeat himself. The maid, startled, quickly agrees. As the maid waits outside, he picks up a dark shirt. He notes that Zenon's clothes are primarily black, a fitting wardrobe for the villain he has now become. He stood in the lavish bedroom, observing the maid. He couldn't help but notice her beauty, a surprising detail for what he considered a minor character. To orient himself in this new reality, he asked her for the current year, month, and day. She replied nervously, stating it was April 5th, 101 in the Slayer calendar. The date confirmed his fears and suspicions. This was undoubtedly the world of Yandere. The date struck him with immense significance. April 5th was the day of the entrance ceremony at the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic in the capital. For him, as a player who had seen the game through to its end, it was an unforgettable day. With this realization, he decided he would begin attending the academy immediately. The maid, however, interrupted his thoughts, asking if he would be foregoing his morning training. The question caught him completely off guard. He was taken aback, questioning her assumption. She explained that he trained every single morning without fail at the same time. This revelation stunned him. He had no idea the original Zenon possessed such a diligent side. It was a facet of the character completely absent from the game. Seeing his hesitation, she offered to prepare breakfast if he intended to take a break. Deciding to maintain the routine, he declared he would train as usual and asked her to guide him to the training grounds. He followed her outside, through the estate, until they arrived at a desolate, ruined courtyard. Stunned by the sight of crumbling pillars and overgrown weeds, he stared in disbelief, questioning if this could truly be Zenon's training ground. He picked up a sword from a nearby rack, its weight feeling strangely familiar in his hand. As he gripped the hilt, a sense of deep connection flowed through him. He was gradually becoming accustomed to Zenon's body, the movements feeling as natural as if they had been his own since birth. His gaze fell upon a row of battered training posts. While he himself knew little of martial arts, he understood that the power this body held was the result of relentless effort, not mere talent. Focusing his will, he summoned a vortex of dark energy into his hand, calling forth the dark blade. The blade of pure darkness erupted from his palm, striking a target with devastating force. The post shattered instantly in a violent explosion of shadow and splintered wood. He grappled with a contradiction. The original Xenon was a hardworking man who mastered advanced dark magic, yet he became known for stealing other people's women. While the reason remained a mystery, he knew that as long as he inhabited this body, he had to understand the man Xenon truly was. Then, a crucial realization struck him. The only reason he disliked Xenon was for his reputation as a womanizer. But right now, in this timeline, it was the day of the school entrance ceremony before the events of the first game. Xenon hadn't stolen any women yet. At this moment, there was no reason to dislike him. This new perspective opened up a world of possibilities. He could lead a relaxed school life, avoiding the romantic entanglements of the second game. Depending on his actions, he could even support the protagonist in defeating the Demon King, or simply stay out of danger. His reverie was interrupted as a maid brought him a basin of water. He quickly apologized, acknowledging her help. His simple words of gratitude caused the maid to freeze in place, the basin clattering softly. He asked why she had turned to stone. Internally, the maid, Leviana, was reeling. She couldn't believe that Xenon-sama was thanking her. It was an utterly shocking turn of events, and she struggled to compose herself. He looked at her directly, explaining that he had always been grateful for her devotion, but had been too shy to express it until now. Leviana could only stare back, utterly speechless. Her heart pounded as he continued, promising to truly appreciate her from now on because he was happy for her support. As she absorbed his words, he made a silent vow. He could not become a villain like the original Xenon. It was better to change his heart now, while he still could. The kindness was too much for Leviana to bear. Tears of pure joy streamed down her face as she declared it the best day of her life, feeling her devotion had finally been rewarded. He was taken aback by her intense reaction, admitting it was his fault for not thanking her sooner and that he would rely on her going forward. Through her tears, she eagerly agreed. With their emotional exchange concluded, he prepared to depart in an ornate carriage. Leviana waved him off, tearfully pleading for him to take care. As he settled inside, he mused that the original Xenon's daily violence must have been so extreme that a simple thank you could provoke such a powerful response. Her cries followed the carriage as it pulled away. She shouted for the young master to come back safely and without any injuries. From his window, he looked back with mild exasperation, muttering for her to just go already. Finally alone inside the moving carriage, he let out a sigh. Leaning forward with his hands clasped, he focused on the critical question now before him. Just how far should he follow the game's original scenario? He reflected on the original story's timeline. The protagonist, Leon Brave, was destined to take 2 years to defeat the Demon King, aided by the heroines. This grand tale was set to begin today, with the school's entrance ceremony. Considering his own feelings, he knew he wouldn't follow that path. He was a firm believer in pure love and had no intention of letting the heroine be betrayed, nor would he be the one to steal another's beloved. This raised a crucial question. As a mere classmate, to what extent could he even involve himself in the main scenario? He recalled the grim conclusion of the sequel, Yandere 2. In that timeline, Leon successfully sealed the Demon King, only for Xenon to steal the heroine. This act of betrayal drove the despairing hero to resurrect the very evil he once defeated. The consequence of that resurrection was catastrophic. The Demon King's unleashed magic obliterated the royal capital and everyone within it, resulting in a truly devastating bad ending. He reasoned that if Xenon's actions were the trigger, then the solution was simple. He just needed to refrain from stealing the heroines. He could simply stand aside and wait for Leon to defeat the Demon King, completely ignoring the game's scenario for his character. With his mind made up, a look of firm resolve settled on his face. He would not follow Xenon's path. The choice had been made. He would forge a destiny entirely different from the one prescribed by the game. Beneath an ornate archway bearing the name Royal Academy of Sword and Magic, a new class of students ascends the steps, their figures small against the grandeur of the institution that awaits them. Among them, a young man trembles with barely contained excitement. He realizes he has finally arrived at the academy that served as the setting for the game, Brave Soul. A determined glint in his eyes, he steels himself and prepares to enter. The academy grounds are a breathtaking sight, a sprawling campus of magnificent architecture centered around a grand, domed hall. Crowds of students fill the main plaza, a sea of new faces ready to begin their journey. As he walks among them, a blush creeps onto his face. He chides himself for being nervous, thinking it pathetic for someone like him who has walked these same school grounds countless times within the game. He pauses to collect himself, covering his face with a hand. He manages to calm down, but the effort drains his energy. His brief moment of peace is shattered by a sharp step nearby, startling him as a girl passes by. His thoughts immediately jump to the future, the entrance ceremony, the orientation, and then the legendary social gathering where the hero, Leon, would meet the heroines. A sinister chuckle escapes him at the thought, but it causes a group of nearby girls to cry out in fear. He freezes, realizing with horror that they are scared of him. His face twists into a wide, manic grin, an expression he seems unaware of. As he turns, 2 more female students see him and recoil, their faces pale with terror. The frightened girls hurry away, one admitting to the other that it was her own fault. Watching them leave, the young man walks on alone, resolving to himself that from now on, he must not laugh in front of other people. Later, Seated alone in the vast auditorium, he feels a pang of loneliness. He quickly dismisses it, reminding himself of his identity, Zenon Baskerville, the brutal villain character. He scoffs at the notion, insisting he is not lonely, even when completely by himself. His brooding is cut short by a voice from the stage. An elderly official announces that the time has come to reveal the top students of the entrance exam. Zenon's head snaps up, his attention captured. As he watched, the announcements for the entrance exam's top scores began. The headmaster's voice called out the fifth-place student, Shell Uranus. She stood from her seat, quietly acknowledging the honor. She is the daughter of a local noble from the frontier and a childhood friend of the game's protagonist, Leon. In fact, it was Shell who encouraged him to enroll in this very academy. Her initial role is that of a mage, a rearguard specializing in offensive magic. The announcements continued with fourth place, Nagisa Saikai. Zenon's heart gave a thump as he recognized another key character, described as lively, curious, and energetic. She hails from an Eastern country with a Japanese-style culture and is the daughter of a swordsmanship dojo master, a true samurai girl. Her initial class is swordsman, wielding a katana with a speed that surpasses even Leon's. Zenon recalled that she carries a darkness in her heart, and helping her dispel it is the key to her story. Next came third place, Aerith Centria. Born to the central nobility, her father is a criminal, a fact which led to her odd upbringing. Her initial role is cleric, a path influenced by her parents' management of the church. Zenon couldn't help but admire her well-proportioned figure, internally dubbing her the goddess of breasts. He recalled her fate in the game, a pitiful victim, broken in both body and spirit by Zenon himself. He resolved that such a future was no longer possible. At that moment, the headmaster's voice boomed across the hall, announcing the academy's runner-up, second place, Zenon Baskerville. His mind reeled. All the main heroines were so cute, and he felt an undeniable urge to get involved with them. A nervous chuckle escaped him as he tried to process the situation. The headmaster's voice cut through his reverie, sharp and commanding. Zenon Baskerville. Startled, Zenon snapped back to the present. He looked up to see every pair of eyes in the hall fixed upon him. A cold sweat broke out on his brow as the realization hit him with full force. He had missed his chance to stand up. Whispers erupted among the students. They recognized the name Baskerville, the infamous twin evil noble family, rumored to have assassinated the previous king and colluded with a neighboring country. Zenon's panic surged. This was the worst kind of attention. The headmaster then spoke directly to him, stating that while his high exam results were commendable, the academy treated nobles and commoners as equals. Disrespectful behavior, even from Marquis' family, would not be tolerated. He remained seated, a flash of panic crossing his mind as he realized he'd missed the timing to stand. His mind raced, weighing his options. Standing up now would seem pathetic, and any careless embarrassment could lead to being bullied. He settled on a course of action. With a defiant smirk, he declared that he apologized for the rudeness and would keep the headmaster's advice in mind, but that he would deliberately choose not to stand. His defiant declaration was met with a stunned, absolute silence from the entire student body. Amidst the silent crowd, the heroines watched the unfolding confrontation with rapt attention. The headmaster's knuckles whitened on the podium. He acknowledged Zenon's cheeky tone, but confirmed his understanding. Zenon had no intention of changing his rebellious attitude. His outward defiance masked an inner turmoil. He panicked, realizing he had already apologized. He might look like a villain, but he was actually a good person. The headmaster cleared his throat, deciding to let the matter rest for now, given the celebratory occasion. However, he issued a stern warning. If no improvement was seen in the future, there would be consequences. Zenon could only look on in shock. As the ceremony continued, Zenon berated himself for his poor timing, realizing he still wasn't used to his new name. The headmaster then announced the top achiever, first place in the entrance exam and class president, Leon Brave. A single student stood. This was Leon Brave, born the child of a hero with the power to seal the Demon King, the game's one and only protagonist. Though a commoner, he was the top student, beloved by many heroines. His initial job was Rune Knight, a rare class that combined close-range combat with magic. The sight of him sent a jolt through Zenon. The protagonist he had played as countless times was right there. He noticed Leon looking in his direction with a stern expression and wondered if he was being glared at, though he couldn't recall having done anything to be hated. From his seat, he watches as Leon Praise is asked to give the greeting as the representative for the new students. Leon calmly accepts. Leon begins his speech, and Zenon wonders if his own disruptive behavior from earlier bothered the top student. Leon humbly explains that he was born a commoner in the countryside and ordinarily would never have had the chance to stand there. He expresses his profound honor at attending the prestigious Royal Sword and Magic Academy and extends his gratitude to his guardians, who are like parents to him, as well as the faculty and upperclassmen. He continues, stating his reason for enrolling is to become stronger and protect the country. While the Slayer's kingdom is peaceful, he asserts that this doesn't mean there is no evil to be hated. With a determined look, he vows to fight the evil that causes people to suffer. Listening from the crowd, Zenon is unimpressed, having expected a more grandiose declaration about becoming a hero king. Leon's voice rings out with a final, pointed declaration. He will fight this evil even if its source is a classmate attending the very same school. His words cause a stir among the students, who begin to murmur amongst themselves. The pointed nature of the comment, however, makes Zenon look up in confusion. The source of his confusion becomes immediately clear as he realizes Leon's sharp, hostile gaze is locked directly onto him. Zenon is stunned, wondering why he's being shown such open hostility when they haven't even done anything to each other yet. The unexpected targeting does not go unnoticed by others. A hypothesis began to form. In the original game, Zenon was merely a side character, a simple-minded member of the Capture Targets group. But now, it seemed the world's setting had changed. He had suddenly become the villain protagonist, complete with a backstory that never existed before. This must be why Leon was already directing such hostility towards him, despite him having done nothing to warrant it. If that was the case, then the future was terrifyingly uncertain. Leon might be defeated by the Demon King, leading to the world's destruction. There was no longer any guarantee that the hero would triumph as planned and secure a happy ending. Meanwhile, at the academy, a ceremony concluded and students were instructed to move to their classrooms. Amidst the shuffling crowd, Zenon sat alone, arms crossed, his expression unreadable and distant. He processed his new reality. If the scenario had truly changed, the knowledge he possessed from the game might be useless. His original plan was to do nothing and simply survive, but now he realized he would need to make a concerted effort. He resolved to do his best not to antagonize Leon, to avoid hindering his actions, and to lead a peaceful school life. His resolution was immediately challenged. From across the classroom, Leon glared at him with undisguised contempt. Zenon felt the intense stare, thinking it was as if Leon was accusing him of some wrongdoing already. He considered a more reliable method for survival. He could join Leon and the others to support the effort to defeat the Demon King. After all, Zenon was known to be the strongest character after the Demon King and Leon himself. By ensuring their victory, he could lead a safe school life and prevent the world from perishing. However, he knew staying true to the main scenario would be tough. It would be a struggle to maintain a wholesome Zenon, especially with influences like a certain teacher who would welcome his darker tendencies. He vowed he would not let that happen, but a crucial question remained. Why did the original Zenon act the way he did in the first place? As the school day concluded, Leon and his friends made plans for a get-together and discussed which clubs to observe. Zenon walked past them, indifferent. He mused that first impressions, formed in seconds, seemed to determine everything. Given his appearance and his family's notorious reputation for tyranny, his social standing was already set in stone. He dismissed them with a thought and decided to hurry home to plan his next steps. A grand carriage awaited him outside the academy. Soon after, he arrived at an imposing mansion, where he was greeted at the door with a formal welcome. "Welcome back, young Master Zenon." Inside, a maid with her hair in twin buns startled as his hand reached toward her face. He asked how long she had been waiting there and if she was cold. Flustered, she insisted she was fine before delivering an urgent message. His lord was waiting for him in the office and requested his presence immediately. He stood before the door, his mind racing. The name echoed in his thoughts, Grandolph Baskerville. A voice from nearby tentatively asked if it was the young master. His memories of the game's lore flooded back. Grandolph, his father, was the ruler of the kingdom's night, the very man who set Zenon on a path of evil. He was a leader of the underworld, an administrator of the crime guild, a ruthless slave trader, and a shadowy slayer who buried everything in darkness. The information painted a picture of a villain without parallel. Resigning himself to the inevitable, he walked down the long hall. He knew he couldn't avoid his father, no matter how much he wanted to. Reaching the grand doors, he knocked and announced his presence. The moment he stepped inside, a torrent of dark energy erupted. A powerful spell, the bloody chain, shot forward and violently ensnared him. The magic slammed him to the ground, leaving him completely bound and helpless on the ornate rug as a figure stood over him. He grunted in pain, straining against the chains as he looked up. A large, shadowed man greeted him with a cold familiarity, stating it had been a while. Through the agony, Zenon recognized his father. The man, Grandolph Baskerville, loomed over him. He explained that the dark magic, bloody chain, not only restrains but also deals intermittent damage, a tool of pure torture. Grandolph then casually brought up Zenon's second place ranking in the entrance exam. With a sudden, brutal stomp, Grandolph pinned him to the floor. He expressed his profound disappointment that Zenon couldn't even achieve first place at a small academy, questioning if he was truly the eldest son. He roared that the Baskerville family is a lineage of the strong who dominate the night, and that one must be the strongest. He accused his son of sullying the family's pride, calling him a fool who would not be allowed any sort of defeat. Randolph sneered, calling Zenon a pathetic son for being unable to move against such a minor challenge. He then delivered an ultimatum. If Zenon couldn't take the top position in the next exam, this would not be the end of it. Announcing he would be away for work, he commanded Zenon to obey the stewards and not neglect his training. After his father's departure, Zenon, battered and bleeding, stumbled out of the room. Two maids rushed to his side in alarm. One cried out his name, while the other urged him to hold on, promising to begin treatment immediately. He lay in bed, the wounds from his father's assault being tended to by a maid. As she carefully applied a potion, He registered with surprise that the horrific damage to his body was already disappearing. Outside, the grand mansion stood silent against the night sky. Looking down, he saw that the maid, Leviana, had fallen asleep on his chest, utterly exhausted from her efforts to save him. He watched her sleep, a storm of thoughts raging within him. He couldn't believe someone would inflict such cruel abuse on their own son. The memory alone was painful. He wondered why such a good person like her would be wasted serving a depraved bastard like the original Xenon, a man who stole other people's lovers. His focus sharpened on the true cause. He knew, undoubtedly, that the reason Xenon had gone crazy, the reason he had strayed so far from any righteous path, was because of one man, Randolph Baskerville. The realization triggered a flood of Xenon's memories. The daily abuse had accumulated, creating an unbearable burden that eventually shattered his mental balance. This breakdown led directly to the brutal act of framing the hero, Leon, and taking the heroine away from him. The memories painted a stark contrast. Leon was the hero, celebrated by all, possessing everything Xenon lacked. He was from a noble bloodline, loved by many heroines, and ranked first in his class. Xenon, born into a closed and cruel family, was despised by other students. Without a father's love, he was abused, fostering an intense jealousy and hatred for Leon, who had everything he so desperately craved. And that was why, in his madness, Xenon had sought to ruin Leon by stealing away all the heroines who adored him. Back in the present, the weight of this inherited past settled upon him. His expression hardened, and his hand clenched into a tight fist. He had decided. He had set a goal for himself in this world. His new purpose was clear. There was a person who needed to be defeated even before the Demon King. He now had a solid goal, to defeat Randolph. That man, he vowed, was an irreconcilable enemy who should not be allowed to exist. He clenches his fist, his eyes filled with a new fire. He resolves that, having been reborn, he will live freely and enjoy this world, denying both the script laid out by the game's creators and the will of his tyrannical father. His moment of intense resolve is suddenly interrupted. A maid, Leviana, bursts into the room and trips, falling directly towards him as he lies in bed. Flustered, she cries out his title, "Young Master." She lands on him, clinging tightly in her surprise. He is left wide-eyed and blushing from the sudden, unexpected embrace. The realization of their position finally hits her, and she lets out a panicked shriek. This small moment of chaos unfolds within a single room of the vast and imposing Baskerville estate, which stands silent against the starry night sky. Sometime later, after the commotion has settled, he sits at a desk in his room. Bathed in the morning light, he focuses intently on writing, beginning to formulate a plan. His first priority is to confirm his knowledge from the game. Using a quill, he meticulously lists out quests and locations, writing everything in Japanese characters. He considers the future events of the story and how to obtain what he needs. He reasons that writing in Japanese is a necessary precaution, ensuring no one in this world can decipher his strategies. With his notes complete, he sets them aside, satisfied. The immediate task of documentation is finished, but now he must confront the larger question of how to live in this world. His thoughts immediately turn to the primary obstacle in his path. To achieve anything, he knows there is one person he must defeat. That man, his father. He contemplates simply leaving the house, but dismisses the idea as impossible. His father would surely send assassins after him. Moreover, if he deviates too far from the original scenario, he won't be able to predict the actions of the hero, Leon. He is trapped. He considered the best-case scenario, hoping the Demon King would be sealed just as the story foretold. But a grim reality overshadowed that hope, his expression tightening with anxiety. The stakes were absolute. If Leon were to lose to the Demon King, the entire world would perish in flames and ruin. Lying awake in an ornate bed, Xenon Baskerville contemplates his new reality. To grow stronger, he knows he must acquire and develop skills. With a quiet resolve, he utters the command to view his status. In response, a holographic display materializes before him in the darkened room. It confirms his identity, Xenon Baskerville, and his job, Magic Swordsman. His swordsmanship skill is listed at a value of 20. He studies the information, recognizing his job as the same one he had in the game, a magic swordsman just like Leon. He confirms his understanding of this world. Damburay. There are no levels. Strength is gained purely by acquiring skills and increasing their proficiency. His gaze drifts down the list of his skills. Swordsmanship 20, Dark Magic 20, Training 20. A flicker of confusion crosses his face. He continues to analyze the numbers. While he understands why swordsmanship and dark magic would have the same values, he is perplexed as to how his training proficiency increased. A sense of unease settles over him as he hopes there will be no opportunities to use it. His finger traces the edge of the display as he notes its stark limitations. This is different from a game status screen. There are no commands for items, settings, save, or load. This realization solidifies his resolve. To become stronger, he must learn new skills and increase his proficiency, noting that the maximum value for combat skills is 50, leaving ample room for growth. He also understands that raising skills to a certain point will unlock higher class jobs. Beyond that, he needs to acquire items, many of which he is already determined to secure. His thoughts drift to the power such items grant. Strong weapons and armor can increase his base ability values, while specific items can unlock entirely new skills and magic. He also considers accessories and damage-reducing talismans, concluding that there are definitely things he must secure. He then considers the means of acquiring them. Items can be purchased from stores, but they can also be found by exploring dungeons or earned as rewards for completing specific events. As he rises from his bed, a final, sobering thought crosses his mind. Items found in dungeons are subject to chance, making them unreliable to obtain. The truly rare items can only be bought at auctions, a venture that requires an immense amount of funds. He stood by the window, contemplating his new reality. While he had no intention of strictly following the game's original scenario, he knew he had to avoid getting in Leon's way. Event items were meant for the protagonist, and if he foolishly took something that caused Leon to lose to the Demon King, it would be game over for everyone. As he pondered this delicate balance, a polite knock echoed from the door of his vast, ornate bedchamber. A voice from the hallway asked for permission to enter. The door opened to reveal a maid carrying a tray with his breakfast. She explained that she thought he might be feeling unwell, so she brought it to his room. Zenon, relieved, admitted he was getting hungry. He recognized the meal's properties instantly. The sandwich and soup had healing effects, while the coffee cured status ailments. It was a dish he knew as Leviana's command kit. He thanked her, remarking that it looked delicious. The maid became completely flustered by the praise, insisting she had done nothing special and was simply performing her duties. Despite her protests, Zenon looked at her warmly and thanked her again, as he always did. His simple words of gratitude were too much for her. As Zenon calmly sipped his coffee, the maid covered her blushing face, overwhelmed with emotion, and a single drop of blood fell from her nose. The overwhelming emotion caused a sudden nosebleed, splattering onto the polished floor. Mortified, the maid hastily apologized and fled the room, promising to return for the dishes later, leaving a stunned Zenon to stare at the evidence of her extreme reaction. He sat back down to his meal, finding the situation both unbelievable and amusing. He couldn't quite comprehend that a simple thank you could elicit such a strong response, but the depth of the maid's adoration was something he found he truly enjoyed. Sometime later, dressed in a formal suit, Zenon walked through the manor's grand halls. He was met by the elderly head butler, who greeted him with a polite good morning. Zenon mused internally that his character in this world already had proper allies, making the original's desperate actions, like stealing another's woman, entirely unnecessary. He addressed the butler by name, Zaius, and bluntly asked if he was going to report his absence from morning practice to his father. Zaius, in his capacity as head butler entrusted with the estate's management, clarified his position. He wasn't there to tattle. He was simply concerned that Zenon might be unwell. The butler continued, his tone serious as he looked down from the top of the stairs. He relayed that Zenon's father, the Lord, has high expectations. He expects his son to grow into a strong individual, worthy of the Baskerville family name. Zaius concluded with a sincere hope that Zenon would not betray that trust. He assures the butler that while he may occasionally take breaks from training, he will ultimately meet his father's expectations. His expression is firm, though a hint of defiance lingers in his eyes. He turns to leave, informing Zaius that simply practicing swings isn't the only way to get strong. With a confident smirk, he declares his intention to become powerful in his own way to surprise his father, then announces his departure. A week passes. At the academy, Zenon's solitary life continues, his menacing presence causing other students to whisper about him. He finds the middle school-level curriculum trivial, as the principles of magic come to him with ease. Across the classroom, Leon Praise watches him, his gaze filled with undisguised hostility. Inside the lecture hall, the teacher announces that the day's lesson will be on dungeon exploration. A sinister grin spreads across Zenon's face. This is the class he has been eagerly awaiting. His unsettling excitement makes nearby students recoil in fear. She explains that dungeons are layers of monsters that exist in countless numbers, serving as mountains of treasure that produce resources infinitely. However, they're also ticking time bombs. If left unattended, they will endlessly spew out monsters. The teacher instructs everyone to form a party before moving out. The very academy they attend was established for the purpose of exterminating the monsters that inhabit these dungeons. Its ultimate goal is to develop human resources capable of protecting the lives of the people. The students gather before a large stone entrance, the tutorial dungeon owned by the academy, known as Sage's Playground. The teacher announces that each party will now enter in turn. Zenon stands ready, his sword drawn. The teacher, noticing he is alone, questions why he isn't in a party. With his hands on his hips, Zenon confidently states that he doesn't need anyone else and is perfectly fine on his own for the tutorial dungeon. His declaration leaves the teacher momentarily speechless. As he stands his ground, another voice cuts in. A young woman with a long, dark ponytail steps forward, stating that she has no problems either. Zenon turns his head slightly to regard the newcomer. The young woman is Nagisa Saikai, a person known for her initial distrust of others. The teacher, concerned, warns them that exploring solo is dangerous, especially for first dungeon. She then suggests that the two of them team up. She stood silently as Zenon dismissed the teacher's suggestion, stating it was fine and unnecessary. He, however, was thinking strategically. To avoid disturbing Leon, he needed to keep his contact with Nagisa to an absolute minimum. Their teacher sighed, then addressed the class with a stern warning. She explained that while there were no particularly dangerous monsters in this dungeon, any incidents that occurred would be the students' own responsibility. In the unlikely event of a death, the academy would take no responsibility, so she implored them not to act recklessly. As a final incentive, she pointed out that their performance would be reflected in their grades, which immediately sent a wave of excitement through the crowd of students. The students instantly began to argue, each group demanding to be the first to enter. Watching them, Zenon noted their eagerness with disdain, thinking that the teacher might as well decide the order herself. As they stood apart from the crowd, Nagisa spoke, remarking that the others were being as carefree as if they were on an outing. Her sudden comment caught Zenon by surprise. She noted that it was obvious from his face that he looked like trouble, and since everyone else was scared, it couldn't be helped. She then asked what business he had with her, since he seemed to be the only one with nothing to do. Before he could respond, she declared that if no one could decide who would go first, then she, Nagisa Saikai, would take the lead. Zenon looked on, stunned, questioning if she was trying to outdo him. Without another word, she strode past the bickering students. Leon and others shouted that her actions were unfair, but Zenon simply watched with a smirk, finding her personality surprising and interesting. He calmly told her he would leave it to her. She entered the stone passageway alone, facing the deep, foreboding darkness of the dungeon. Behind her, the other students continued to complain about her selfishness. Having reached his limit, Zenon erupted in fury. He roared that their indecision was a waste of time and demanded they settle the matter with rock, paper, scissors, or a lottery before the sun went down. His outburst had an effect. Leon Praise announced it was their turn, and the other students, though flustered, fell in line behind him. The teacher watched, surprised, admitting to herself that she had a newfound respect for Zenon Baskerville's unexpected leadership. She then corrected her own assessment, realizing that the student's distance from Zenon was likely due to his intimidating appearance and family name, a prejudice she admitted to sharing. As their teacher, she felt a need to reflect deeply on this bias. Meanwhile, Leon questioned Zenon's decision to go last, pointing out that he hadn't even joined their game of rock, paper, scissors to decide the order. Zenon's gaze sharpened as he replied that he needed to confirm something specific about the arrangement. He turned his attention to the teacher, posing a direct question. Would the items and treasures found within the dungeon be subject to any kind of tax? She clarified that as this was a school-managed lesson, no taxes would be applied. She did, however, caution him that the items obtainable were of little monetary value, and that while the dungeon lacked strong monsters, he should still retreat if things became dangerous, especially since he was alone. A sly smile spread across Zenon's face as he expressed his relief and his intent to search diligently for items. With a final dismissive wave, he thanked her for the concern and walked away. The teacher watched him depart, thinking she was a reliable and good teacher for showing such care. But as he walked, a dark memory from a game surfaced in Zenon's mind, a vision of this very teacher, defeated and chained in a basement. He clenched his fist with grim determination, swearing to himself that he would never allow that world to come to pass. His resolve solidified. He stood before the gaping maw of the dungeon, ready to face whatever lay within. Inside a stone dungeon, Zenon unleashes an attack. With a flick of his wrist, he casts Shadow Edge, sending a volley of dark, blade-like projectiles hurtling forward. The gelatinous slime creatures bounce and burst upon impact with the floor and walls. The dark projectiles streak down the long, cavernous hall, a single swing of his sword clearing the path of all enemies. He pauses to reflect, a thoughtful hand to his chin. He recognizes the dungeon's structure and the items dropped by the defeated slimes, like the slime core. Everything, he realizes, is exactly like the game. This realization confirms his suspicions. It's merely a tutorial area, filled only with weak mobs and devoid of traps, making it simple enough to clear alone. With this understanding, he moves with renewed confidence, cutting down the remaining slimes with contemptuous ease. He considers it all just light work. As he collects another dropped item, his thoughts turn to the true problem, the formidable monster that awaits on the bottom floor. His thoughts on the future threat do not distract him from the present. Before him, a room teems with another horde of slimes. He scoffs, dismissing them as small fries, and leaps down into their midst. He lands among them with a sneer, sword held high. He taunts the creatures crackling with energy around him, declaring that they are nothing more than punching bags. The creatures surge around him, but he merely breathes heavily, sweat dripping from his chin, a satisfied smirk on his face as they are destroyed. After a moment, the chaos subsides. The room is clear, wisps of energy fading into the air. Standing alone at the top of a grand staircase, he decides it's time to proceed to the next level. He sits injured against the stone wall, supported by Leon and Shell. Leon asks if he is hurt, but Zenon can only think about his own pathetic performance. Even against weak monsters in his first dungeon, he needed help. This memory is from the third floor of that dungeon, where the number of casualties among the students was steadily increasing. At the time, only Leon, Shell, and Nagisa had been skilled enough to reach the bottom layer. He recalls watching another student use a class skill to heal the wounded, telling them to line up. Xenon internally scoffs, believing that teaming up with such brainless allies would only drag him down. The girl's soothing magic flows effortlessly. Leon thanks her profusely, remarking that as expected of the sage, Aerith Centria's mana seems to be limitless. Watching her, Xenon is struck by an unfamiliar feeling, his eyes wide with a sudden, unnerving vulnerability. He slaps himself hard across the face, forcing the thought away. He realizes that if he had stared any longer, he would have fallen for her. That, he thinks, would be a bad ending for the Demon King's resurrection. He cannot afford to become a compromised protagonist. With renewed resolve, he decides to press onward. However, just as he turns to go, Aerith approaches him directly. She asks if he is Baskerville. He acknowledges her in turn, identifying her as Cantry, the Academy's third-ranked student. As other students watch nervously, Aerith smiles and confirms her identity, addressing him as her junior. She then offers to heal him, but he waves it off, stating that he doesn't need it. He dismisses the dungeon as a mere tutorial and questions what she has been doing instead of advancing. Aerith looks at him kindly and explains her actions simply. She is healing everyone because she is someone who cannot leave the injured all alone. His thoughts lingered on her. Aerith Centria, an incarnation of dedication and self-sacrifice, a woman who would give her life for anyone. He recalled moments from the game where she had done just that. He asked her if she needed to move forward, but she simply smiled, explaining that she had her friend's permission. To her, it was more important for the entire party to reach the goal together. He found her sweet, buddy-buddy attitude great. Her behavior was admirable, certainly, but during the game, it had always filled him with anxiety. This type of person, one who would sacrifice themselves and give up their own happiness for the sake of others. He knew she wasn't a bad person, but her very nature annoyed him. He dismissed the notion as absurd and turned to leave. He decided he wasn't the one to say anything. He would leave the scolding to the hero. She called out, asking if something was the matter. Without fully turning back, he told her to keep helping others, but to do so in moderation. Then, he announced he was going on ahead. His resolve hardened. It was not his job to save Aerith, the wounded saint, from her endless cycle of self-sacrifice. That was Leon's role. As a villain, his part was simply to make a stylish exit. With that, he turned towards the gaping maw of the dungeon's lower levels, a long, dark staircase descending into the abyss. The descent led him to the fourth floor, where a horde of horned, rabbit-like beasts charged through the darkness. He calmly wiped his blade clean, certain that none of his other classmates could have made it this far. He presumed that Leon, Seal, and Nagisa had most likely already reached the lowest floor. His thoughts drifted to them, picturing the hero's party facing a great, shadowy beast. By now, he figured that monster had probably already been defeated by Leon. He stands amidst a field of defeated lesser monsters, feeling a bit unsatisfied with his first dungeon experience. His thoughts are cut short by a piercing scream echoing from deeper within the cavern. The terrified cry belongs to another student, who sprints past Nagisa's Psyche in a desperate panic. He shouts a frantic warning for everyone to get back, cursing that they'll die if they don't move. Nagisa, hearing the raw fear in his voice, turns toward the commotion. Her eyes widen as she spots the running student and another girl who has fallen to the ground, unable to escape. A massive shadow looms over them both. It is the gargoyle, a monstrous beast that should only exist on the dungeon's lowest floor, now standing before them with menacing claws extended. The male student screams in fury at the sight of his injured classmate. As the gargoyle roars its intent to kill all humans, a brilliant light erupts. Leon prays, his hero's blood awakened, joins the fight alongside Nagisa and Shell to drive back the beast. From a distance, Xenon watches the scene unfold, recognizing the fated moment. He realizes his memory was flawed. He had forgotten a key detail. It was mentioned briefly in the game that the gargoyle had fled from somewhere else, killing several classmates as it escaped. Below, the hero's party confronts the monster. Elsewhere in the cavern, the tragic consequences of that escape become clear. A student cradles the body of his classmate, weeping that it was his fault. He let the enemy get away and allowed his friend to die. His grief is cut short as the gargoyle looms over him. Xenon observes the scene dispassionately, concluding that a minor character compelled to die is about to meet his fate. He coldly decides that this student will be the one who is killed. The monster's claw descends, silencing the student's cries. Xenon understands the necessity of this sacrifice, for Leon to grow as a hero and face the demon race. This death is a required catalyst. He briefly wonders if helping them would be a bad thing. He contemplates the two paths before him. If he intervenes, the future where Leon defeats the Demon King and saves the world might change. Acknowledging the sadness of the situation, he concludes there is no choice but to ignore it. As the students cry out in terror, he turns away. He stood his ground, fist tightening at his side. Behind him, a desperate exchange cut through the noise. One student urged the other to run, to save themselves, but the reply was defiant. There was no way they would leave their friend behind to escape alone. The consequence of his hesitation materialized in a blinding flash. The two students, one clutching the other, screamed as the gargoyle's power surged towards them, a wave of certain death. But in the final moment, an explosion erupted in front of them, not on them. A figure now stood between them and the beast, and the students could only look on in stunned silence. The gargoyle howled, arcs of raw power coursing over its body from the unexpected blow. Xenon glared at the creature, his expression twisted with frustration. He cursed his own decision, realizing with bitter clarity that he was simply not cut out to be a villain. Xenon Baskerville raises a hand, silencing his classmate. He declares that a hero who can't grow stronger from a rewritten scenario isn't a true hero, and that abandoning his classmates would make him trash. He vows he won't let them die, just for the sake of the scenario. The massive, horned gargoyle bellows in rage, warning the human that he won't get away with this. He laughs maniacally at the creature's threat, mocking it. He questions how a mere tutorial boss has any right to bark at him as he charges forward, dark energy swirling around his fist. Leaping through the air, he proclaims himself a truly great villain, one that even the protagonist cannot defeat. He asks contemptuously how a mere mob monster could think to stand in his way, suggesting it should just die for him. The gargoyle smashes its fist into the ground where he just was, shattering the stone. As the beast roars in frustration, Xenon lands a glancing blow, noting internally that his opponent is tough. With a grimace of annoyance, he compares the creature to a stiff wooden doll. He recognizes that the gargoyle possesses the same level of strength as monsters encountered in the mid-game. He realizes that with his starting equipment, a rusty sword, he can't land a single effective blow. He unleashes a skill, crying out Shadow Edge. The magical attack strikes the gargoyle's face, causing it to shriek in pain. His mind races, analyzing the enemy. The gargoyle has high physical stats, but low magic resistance. This means his only option is to attack with magic. A grim look crosses his face as he wonders just how many dozen magic attacks he'll have to land to win. The enraged gargoyle roars its intent to kill him. He reflects on the situation. In a real game, this is an enemy that should be defeated by a party. But unfortunately for him, he is a solo player. He resolves to finish it all at once with a critical hit. As the gargoyle lunges, Xenon stomps his foot down, declaring with certainty that he knows its weakness. With a final, upward thrust, he drives his sword deep into the monster's chest. It's this place, he thinks, striking the precise weak point. The gargoyle lets out a final, agonized scream as it is impaled. He recalled the fundamental principle of this world. All enemy characters in Damber have weak points. An attack that lands there is treated as a critical hit. For the gargoyle, that spot was directly under its chin. He leaned in close to the dying beast, a cruel smile on his face. He taunted it, asking how it felt to be killed by a lesser opponent, a humiliating end for a creature that had resorted to bullying the weak in revenge for being defeated by the hero. The gargoyle could only manage a guttural rasp. Its life faded. The gargoyle reacted with a final, startled cry as Xenon unleashed a devastating spell, roaring its name. Hellflare. A torrent of dark energy erupted from beneath the creature, engulfing it completely. It shrieked in agony as its stone body was torn apart and incinerated. He stood over the disintegrating remains, calmly sheathing his sword. He reflected that the magic swordsman was the strongest starting job in this game, a class he shared with Leon. Against a weak starting boss like this, he knew there was no way he could possibly lose. He examined the item cards that materialized from the monster's defeat, noting this was his first proper win since arriving in this world. Though unsure how defeating the event monster would affect the story, he celebrated saving a life that was supposed to be lost according to the game's original plot. His thoughts settled. He turned his attention to the students huddled in the cave. He walked towards them, raising a hand in a casual greeting. "You guys all right?" he asked. The male student was kneeling, tending to his injured female companion. The young man looked up, a bead of sweat on his brow. His gaze fell upon the empty healing potion bottles scattered on the ground, a stark reminder that their supplies were completely exhausted. Seeing their predicament, Xenon held out several potions. He told the startled student that he could use them, stating the obvious, they needed them. The student hesitated, asking if it was all right since he had nothing to offer in return. Xenon dismissed his concern, saying they were cheap and not to worry. The student gratefully accepted and administered a potion to the girl. As color returned to her face, Xenon remarked that it was great they both survived. The girl, now conscious, looked up towards her savior. She watched as her companion bowed deeply before Xenon Baskerville, his head touching the rocky ground. He offered his profound thanks, not just for the healing potion, but for saving their lives. Xenon, standing over them, simply told him not to mention it, as they were all classmates. The young man then reflected on the battle, wondering to himself who could have predicted such a powerful monster would appear in this dungeon. He admitted that while he hadn't meant to let his guard down, the situation had been completely unexpected. His thoughts quickly turned to self-recrimination. He slammed his fists against the ground, declaring that it was his fault as the leader that his friends had died. If only he had been stronger, they wouldn't have had to face such a horrible event. Xenon cut in, his expression unreadable, stating that the monster was an irregular, and that even if they had lost, it wouldn't have meant anything. He advised the grieving student that if he truly felt responsible, then he simply needed to become stronger to protect his friends the next time. Internally, Xenon observed the boy's powerful sense of responsibility for his teammate's injury, thinking it was a quality far too noble for a mere background character. The words struck a chord. With tears welling in his eyes, the student agreed, resolving to become stronger, just like Baskerville. Xenon, however, dismissed the notion, telling him not to use him as an example. He advised that academy life is long, and simply doing his best would be enough. But the student wasn't finished. He bowed his head once more, insisting he wanted to apologize properly. He confessed that he had misunderstood Xenon, admitting he had already heard that Xenon was an annoying person. Xenon simply listened, a neutral his only response. He elaborated on his prejudice, explaining that he'd thought Xenon was a much worse person. He cited Xenon's scary face and the Baskerville family's poor reputation as reasons for his judgment. But now, he concluded, he saw that Xenon had turned out to be a good guy. Xenon's expression remained placid as he replied, "Yeah, I know that." Despite Xenon's terse reply, the student pressed on, bowing low once more. He recounted how they and their classmates had ignored Xenon in the classroom, yet Xenon could have abandoned them. Instead, he went out of his way, risked danger to save them, and even shared his valuable healing potions. Admitting he was truly wrong, he begged for forgiveness. His plea hung in the air. Xenon was caught completely off guard, a faint blush dusting his cheeks. He realized that, as a loner, this was the first time he had ever properly talked to a classmate. The situation felt so embarrassing he didn't know what to say. Pushing past the awkwardness, he dismissed the apology, reaffirming the truth that his face is scary and that Baskerville is an evil person. He then held out a small, ornate object. He presented the item to the student, identifying it as a monster-repelling magic incense. He told the boy to use it to ensure a safe exit from the dungeon, explaining that he himself would be going on ahead. He explained that the item should be effective against the weak monsters found in this particular dungeon. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the student vowed that he would definitely repay this favor, acknowledging how much he owed him. With a casual thumbs up, he dismissed the student's promise, telling him to repay the favor once he'd achieved success. Then, turning his back, he ventured alone into the dungeon's depths, where electrified, wolf-like beasts roamed. He descended into the lowest floor of the dungeon, a place known as the Playground of the Wise. As he stepped into a new chamber, his presence was immediately noticed. Leon Praise, standing nearby, stared in shock, uttering the name Baskerville in disbelief. He approached the group, which included Nagisa Saikai and Shell Uranus. With a hint of condescension, he asked if they were all right, remarking that such safety was to be expected from the descendant of a hero. His words struck a nerve. Leon, his face smudged with grime, angrily questioned how he could have known they were in danger, his tone accusing as he wondered aloud if Xenon himself was responsible. Unfazed, Xenon waved off the accusation. He explained that he didn't know what Leon was so angry about, but since a powerful monster had appeared earlier, he had merely assumed they had also run into it. The explanation shattered Leon's composure. He realized with horror that they too had been attacked by that same monster, calling it a miracle they were unharmed. The truth crashed down on him. It was his failure, his letting it escape, that led to his classmates being injured. He crumpled in despair. As he spiraled into guilt, Shell Uranus stepped forward to comfort him. She insisted that it wasn't his fault, reassuring him that he had protected them. Without him, she tearfully explained, both she and Nagisa might have died. He collapses to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he slams his fist on the stone floor. He cries out in anguish, consumed by the thought that if only he had properly defeated his foe, his classmates would never have been harmed. He screams his own powerlessness, questioning how he can be the descendant of a hero when he is so weak. As his cries echo in the chamber, his companions react. Nagisa Saikai watches him with a stern, unwavering gaze. The gamer protagonist looks down at the scene, a shadow crossing his face as he quietly says Leon's name. He runs a hand through his hair, a thoughtful, almost calculating expression on his face as he processes the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, Aerith and Nagisa kneel beside the distraught Leon, attempting to console him. This moment is a critical juncture. In the original timeline of events, the enemy Leon failed to defeat would go on to kill a classmate, and the profound regret from that tragedy was the catalyst for his dramatic growth. The gamer protagonist looks up, pondering the divergence. He understands that with the changes he has made to the timeline, the original outcome is no longer certain. He questions whether the same growth can be expected from Leon now, and wonders what the hero will do in this altered scenario. In the aftermath, Leon Praise slams his fist into the stone floor, his knuckles bloody. He grits his teeth in anguish, furious with himself for his perceived failure. As he seethes, Nagisa and Aerith try to console him. Nagisa reminds him that he saved them, even if some were injured, and insists he shouldn't blame himself. If not for him, she, Aerith, and her classmates would have been lost. From a short distance, Xenon watches the scene unfold. The dark-haired youth turns away, his expression unreadable. He internally reflects that it's impossible to guess how Leon will grow from this point forward. For now, he decides he just needs to focus on what he could definitively do. He turns back to Leon, asking if he still needs anything before announcing his departure. He advises Leon to be careful on his way back, but is stopped when Leon calls out his family name, Baskerville. Xenon, poised to depart, tells Leon to make it quick if he has something to say. From the floor, Leon looks up, his expression conflicted, and utters a quiet, "Thank you." The quiet words are followed by an unexpected gesture. Leon bows deeply from the waist. He thanks Xenon for providing medicine to the injured students and for cleaning up his mess. Xenon is visibly surprised, thinking how this is a complete reversal from the hostility Leon had shown him until now. The blonde youth, flustered, quickly turns his head and adds, "But don't get me wrong." As he watches, Xenon thinks to himself that, as expected, the protagonist is following the path he must. As he walks away, a smirk plays on Xenon's lips. He vows to never forgive an evildoer like Leon, musing that he will get what he deserves one day. From behind, Leon calls out, asking him to wait. Before he can turn, Nagisa Saikai steps into his path, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. Her gaze is sharp and direct as she confronts him, asking, "You were the one who defeated the gargoyle, weren't you?" He meets her intense gaze with a cool, knowing smirk. Unfazed by the accusation, he simply replies, "So what if it was me?" He is met with a knowing smile from Nagisa Saikai. She confirms that her eyes had not failed her. As she suspected, his aura was completely different from everyone else in their class. She proposes they spar sometime, asserting that one can only become stronger by fighting powerful opponents. As she turns to leave, Xenon scratches his head in frustration, realizing that troublesome people now have him on their radar and anticipating difficult times ahead. He watches her walk away down the long, stone-walled corridor, leaving him alone in the passage. His attention shifts to the end of the hall, where a grand, empty throne sits upon a dais. He reflects internally that the dungeon is now cleared, the mission completed with barely a scratch. The proof of his victory is the medal awarded for clearing the sage's playground. He holds the medal, thinking back on the fight. The gargoyle had been tough, and he initially believed just driving it off would be enough. However, he knew that failing to pick up the medal would mean the floor clear wouldn't register, a classic mistake for a player of this world's game. A thought then strikes him. Did Leon and the others remember to grab their medals? He muses that he wouldn't be surprised if they forgot, offering his silent condolences if that's the case. He turns his mind to what he should do next. He walks confidently toward a seemingly solid section of the wall and presses his hand against the stone blocks with a heavy thud. The wall slides open, revealing a secret chamber filled with an immense, glittering mountain of treasure. A look of manic glee spreads across his face as he dives headfirst into the piles of gold coins. He recognizes it instantly, the room of the nouveau riche. It's a secret area that, according to his knowledge, should not appear until a dungeon has been cleared at least twice. The hidden room is vast, its contents gold, armor, and enchanted weapons, a testament to the incredible and unlikely fortune he has just uncovered. He immediately spots a valuable item amidst the treasure, a magic bag. He exclaims in delight, recognizing the ornate pouch as it begins to fill with coins from a nearby chest. He knew this was a key item from the valuables category, capable of infinitely storing the gold and items he had gathered from his previous dungeon clears. Without hesitation, he puts it to use, watching as a torrent of gold and items flows into the bag's magical depths. He leaps into the air, overcome with joy, shouting about his sudden, immense wealth. His elation gives way to a determined focus. He declares his intention to loot everything in sight, wading into the vast sea of treasure filled with weapons, scrolls, and gems. But as he moves through the hoard, a strange power suddenly surges through him. Dark, crackling energy envelopes his hand and arm, causing him to stop short with a shocked expression. The strange energy directs his gaze toward a single, magnificent weapon half buried in the gold. A radiant light emanates from a greatsword, which he recognizes as the Demon Blade, Heavenly Feather Cutter. He recognized it instantly. This was the very weapon he had wielded in the game, a curved blade resembling a katana marked by crimson veins. He recalled the countless hours spent strengthening it, forging a weapon that surpassed even the legendary Holy Sword's brave. He felt a deep connection, as if greeting his beloved sword. He lifts his beloved sword, its power palpable in his hand. He remembers its true potential. With maxed-out skills, it could inflict massive damage even on the Demon King in the game's hardest mode. The fact that this specific sword is here sparks a profound thought. His gaze sweeps across the room again, no longer seeing just treasure, but something far more personal. He questions if this entire room, filled with these specific items, is a manifestation of his own save data. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place. The existence of these items, especially his unique sword, can only mean one thing. His save data from the game he played, Yandere, has somehow been brought into this world. He stood in the darkness, the single, burning question echoing in his mind. Who in the world made this happen? The realization solidified as he stood amidst the treasure. This wasn't a random twist of fate. He hadn't ended up in Xenon's body by his own volition, which meant someone had intentionally willed him into this world. But who, and for what purpose? He pondered the specifics of his situation. Why was he reincarnated as Xenon, a side character, and not the protagonist, Leon? It couldn't be a coincidence. He wondered if a god or a devil was behind it all, questioning their ultimate goal in sending him here. The most baffling part remained. How did they manage to bring his game's saved data into this reality? His thoughts were interrupted as he stepped out from the dungeon's hidden exit. A voice called out his family name, Baskerville. The voice belonged to the female teacher from the academy. She tossed a small metallic object toward him. "Catch," she said. He caught it, recognizing it with surprise as a medal. With a bright smile and a soft clap, the teacher made a formal declaration as other students looked on curiously. Xenon Baskerville can, she announced. I hereby acknowledge that you have cleared this sage's playground. Xenon processed her words, realizing this whole ordeal had been a test, and that Leon and the others hadn't noticed his detour. The teacher confirmed his success, granting him permission to explore the other dungeons. She added that it was great he stayed safe despite the gargoyle's appearance, though a private thought revealed her disappointment, a flash of what a shame it was. Later, as he and Urza walked through the academy grounds, he contemplated the powerful equipment he'd acquired. He realized he couldn't equip most of it yet, as his skill proficiency was too low. It became clear that going solo in high-level dungeons had its limits. He needed to find companions. He resolved to focus on raising his skill proficiency. The thought of having left himself weaker, more accessible weapons crossed his mind, but he dismissed it immediately. There was no point in such regrets. He continued to weigh his options, considering the potential for abnormal situations. While medicine could cure poison, he would be helpless against paralysis or petrification without a companion capable of purification. The conclusion was clear. Having allies was essential. With a frustrated huff, he acknowledged the glaring problem. He was a loner. His mind raced through the possibilities for recruitment. He recalled that in the world of Damburay, one could hire a mercenary, but he knew the downsides. They couldn't be fully trusted and might abandon him or steal his loot in a crisis. He briefly considered his classmates, but unlike Leon, he had no capable companions among them. That idea was a non-starter. This left him with only two viable paths: mercenaries or slaves. In the Slayer Kingdom, slaves could be legally purchased at auction, their loyalty enforced by enslavement magic. He wrestled with the morality of this choice. With his life on the line, he felt he had no other option. Yet, a part of him, the wholesome Japanese person from his past life, recoiled at the idea of purchasing another being. The grim reality of his situation solidified his resolve. He understood with stark clarity that there were likely no second chances in this world. With that thought, he accepted the path he had to take. Quitting was not an option. As the old saying goes, one can't have their cake and eat it too. He concluded that in order to survive, faithful subordinates were a necessity, even if that meant owning slaves. His decision made, his destination became clear. Before him stood a massive, sprawling auction house composed of grand tents, a slave auction, a place where greed and desire intertwined. At a lavish, dimly lit establishment, an usher in a top hat recognizes Xenon Baskerville. Addressing him as the young master of the Baskerville family, the usher welcomes him warmly and directs him to a seat in the front row, which Xenon accepts with a curt word of thanks. He settles into the ornate chair, his expression hardening as he contemplates his grim mission. To confront his father, the man at the pinnacle of the underworld, he requires subordinates. This forces him into an uneasy alliance with repulsive slave traders, a necessary evil to participate in their trade. Moments later, an auctioneer takes the circular stage. With a grand gesture, he addresses the crowd of respected ladies and gentlemen, announcing that the slave auction will now begin. The first slaves are brought out: a small girl, a muscular man, and a woman with long hair, all in chains. The bidding erupts instantly, with prices climbing rapidly into the hundreds of thousands. From his seat, Xenon watches the frenzied exchange with a cold, analytical gaze. After a fierce round, the auctioneer congratulates the winner of bid number 5 for their 800,000 coin purchase. He then presents the next item: a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, starting at 100,000. A wave of excited murmurs ripples through the audience as the boy is displayed on stage. He glances down, confident in his finances. His pockets are heavy with gold coins looted from the room of the nouveau riche, more than enough to acquire 1 or 2 slaves for his cause. His thoughts shift to selection. He pulls out an ornate, monocle-like device. While a slave with strong combat skills would be ideal, he knows there are other factors to consider. He raises the item to his eye. It is the God's Eye, another piece he acquired from the nouveau riche. He recalls its primary function: to appraise the abilities of monsters. Through the lens of the God's Eye, his vision is transformed. He can now perceive glowing data panels hovering before each slave, displaying their hidden attributes and skills. He focuses his analysis, knowing the device will make it easy to identify anyone with skills useful for combat. He has no interest in other talents, dismissing the idea of acquiring someone with a charm skill. He continued his assessment of the slaves on offer, but found none with the specific talents he sought. He mused that while skills could be learned over time, those that were innate developed at a far superior rate. Disappointed by the selection, he turned away from the stage, preparing to leave the auction house. Just as he resolved to find another way to recruit subordinates, the auctioneer's voice boomed, announcing the final slave of the day. The man on stage declared with great fanfare that they were presenting an Oni girl from the northern demi-human continent, a race whose rarity was said to rival even that of the Dragonkin. The announcement caused a stir in the crowd and made Xenon turn back. His eyes widened in utter shock. He recognized her immediately. The white hair, pale skin, golden pupils, and crimson horns were the unmistakable trademarks of an Oni. It was Ulza Whitiger. He couldn't comprehend it. Why was she here? As she stood chained on the auction block, he grappled with the impossibility of the situation. He knew for a fact that Ulza was not a character native to the world of the game Dungeon and Brave. His mind raced, recalling her true origin. Ulza was a character from Warlord of the Holy Sea, a separate war simulation title made by the same developers. In that game, the objective was to gather allies to wage war against enemy nations, and she was one of those potential allies. Her presence in the world of Dungeon and Brave was a complete anomaly. He grew deeply unsettled, realizing the boundaries between different game scenarios were somehow blurring. A profound question formed in his mind. What was truly happening to this world? While he was lost in thought, the auction erupted into a frenzy. The Oni's rarity, combined with their slow aging, perpetually youthful appearance, and exceptional physical prowess, drove the bids to astronomical heights in mere moments. He grappled with the impossible reality before him, his mind racing. This world seemed to be blending the settings from the games Danbare 1 and 2 with the world of Holy Sea. He wondered if, perhaps, they were never separate worlds to begin with. As a bid of 5 million echoed through the hall, he remained seated, contemplating the connection. The stages of the stories were different, but both games were made by the same developer. It wouldn't be strange for their backstories to be intertwined. His eyes scanned the information displayed for the auction. Ulza Whittaker, possessing skills in physical reinforcement, super strength, and hammer mastery. The implications of her abilities struck him. With 3 innate, combat-related skills, she was undoubtedly the ideal talent he had been searching for. However, a chilling thought followed. If the world of Holy Sea was truly connected, then Ulza should be following its scenario. He recalled that she begins as a slave before becoming the main character's companion. He questioned if this auction was that exact plot point, worrying that purchasing her would entangle him in another hero's story. His gaze drifted back towards the stage, his mind racing with the potential consequences of his actions. The auctioneer's voice cut through his thoughts, announcing a new bid of 6.5 million. As the price climbed, Xenon rose from his seat and strode to the edge of his private box, looking down at the chained girl on the stage. Without hesitation, he raised his hand. 10 million, he declared. On the stage below, Ulza's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Xenon clenched his other fist, his resolve hardening. His staggering bid sent a shockwave through the auction hall. The crowd erupted in murmurs, one man exclaiming at how brazenly he had jumped the price. Another questioned spending so much on a single girl, though it was noted she wasn't cheap to begin with. Xenon stood firm, his hands still raised. As the murmurs continued, the weight of his decision settled upon him. A bead of sweat traced its way down his temple as he realized what he had just done. With 10 million, he could have equipped an entire party with the strongest gear and challenged a final boss. But his regret was fleeting, replaced by a grim resolve. He recalled Ulza's fate in the Holy Sea storyline, rescued by the protagonist, but only after her spirit was shattered by the sickening cruelty of nobles. He understood that his actions here would disrupt that future, perhaps even changing the outcome of the war. He justified his interference, knowing the tragedy that awaited her and finding himself unable to simply ignore it. The protagonist of Holy Sea could handle a few changes to the plot. In the end, he couldn't bring himself to be the complete villain his new identity suggested. Below, the auctioneer's voice boomed. There it is, a bid of 10 million. Is there anyone who will compete with this handsome youth? He watches as his 10 million bid send a shockwave through the room. The stout bidder who had been competing against him chokes on the number, his face contorted in disbelief, while the rest of the audience murmurs in astonishment. He sits back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face, confident that no one can compete with his villainous scowl. From the stage, Ulza Whittaker looks on, her expression unreadable. Leaning forward slightly, he addresses the girl directly, his voice low but clear, telling her he is there to help her. Ulza turns her head, a faint blush dusting her cheeks as she looks at him. Meanwhile, on the auction floor, the stout bidder struggles to respond. He manages to raise his hand weakly, prompting the auctioneer to announce a counteroffer. The bid has been raised to 10,500,000. The auctioneer then calls for any other bids. Without a moment's hesitation, Xenon declares a new bid, 12 million. The number stuns the auctioneer into silence. The crowd gasps, repeating the staggering amount. Seeing no further competition, the auctioneer announces that the Oni girl has been sold for 12 million and calls for a round of applause. The room erupts in thunderous applause. Xenon simply raises a hand in acknowledgement, a dismissive sound escaping his lips as he accepts his victory. His purchase secured, he proceeds to a private room behind the stage to finalize the transaction, carrying a case presumably filled with the payment. Beyond the curtains, in a well-furnished chamber, Ulza Whittaker stands alone, waiting for her new master. As he enters the room, he is taken aback when the girl rushes towards him. She introduces herself as Ulza and, with a cheerful giggle, embraces his arm, declaring it's nice to meet her new master. Her bright, affectionate personality leaves him stunned. He recalls in the game Holy Sea, Ulza was always expressionless, like a doll. This was not the personality he remembered. Ulza, oblivious to his inner turmoil, looks up at him with sparkling eyes, vowing to devote herself to working for his sake and asking him to love her forever. He stared in disbelief as Ulza Weidiger looked up at him with concern, asking what was wrong. Internally, he grappled with the stark contrast between his expectations and reality, comparing her to an eager puppy. He wondered if this could be her true character, the person she was before she was enslaved and broken. He quickly brushed off her question, saying it was nothing. Realizing he couldn't bring her back to his estate in her current state, he turned to the auction house manager, Lesbold. He stated that he needed a change of clothes for her. Lesbold chuckled, confirming with a knowing smile that he likely had something suitable in the slave's waiting room, indicating a curtained-off area. He then instructed Ulza to go with Lesbold, but she whined, expressing her reluctance to leave his side. Xenon gently reassured her, promising that everything would be fine and that he would be waiting for her. Ulza sought one last confirmation, asking if he would truly wait. Assured by his promise, Ulza disappeared behind the curtain to change, leaving Xenon and Lesbold to wait. A short while later, her voice called out, announcing she was finished. Xenon instructed her to come out and show him. The curtain parted, and a pair of simple, dark shoes stepped out onto the checkered floor. Urza emerges from behind a curtain, presenting herself in a new, simple white tunic and shoes with a cheerful tada. Xenon, looking startled, points out that just changing her shoes isn't enough. Urza, however, seems delighted just to have proper footwear. The auction house manager advises against Xenon's next impulse. Ignoring him, Xenon declares his intention to remove Urza's collar, which is shown to be engraved with the name Xenon Vaskerville. Hearing this, Urza explains that the collar, with his name on it, is what proves she belongs to him. The manager quickly adds a warning. If the collar is removed, she becomes an ownerless slave, which would expose her to great danger. Xenon, unconvinced, crosses his arms and demands to know what specific danger she would face. The manager elaborates that a slave's collar is their only proof of ownership, and that slaves without owners possess no human rights whatsoever. To illustrate the grim reality, the manager explains that because Urza is of the highly valued Oni race, someone could kidnap or assault her on the street, and it would not even be considered crime. The weight of this information hits Xenon, who grimaces as he realizes the truth in the manager's words. The manager presses on, stating that if her status as Xenon's property isn't immediately obvious, someone will inevitably try to take her. He continues, detailing the social hierarchy of the Slayer Kingdom, where demi-humans have low status due to poor relations with elves and dwarves, existing in towns only as slaves. Urza's horns clearly mark her as a demi-human, and lacking a collar would signify she's a runaway, subjecting her to horrible treatment. Despite this, Xenon mutters that he has no interest in keeping a girl in a collar. Urza, however, tugs on his sleeve, insisting that she doesn't mind. She beams, declaring that the collar is proof she belongs to her master and that she likes it a lot. Faced with her earnest plea, Xenon's resolve wavers. He admits he isn't fully convinced but agrees to go along with it for now, deciding not to worry if she is fine with the arrangement. With the matter settled, the manager smiles. He assures them they will have some time to themselves and offers to show Xenon to his room. He bids Xenon farewell, leaving him alone in the opulent room. The space is dominated by a large, circular bed and decorated with romantic lighting, leading Xenon to realize with a sweat drop that the manager has completely misunderstood his intentions. As he stands there, Urza throws off her blanket on the bed. With a cheerful cry, she announces that it's time to get started. She promptly begins to pull off her simple tunic. Xenon, completely aghast, shouts in protest, demanding to know why she is suddenly stripping. He scrambles to put her clothes back on, but she looks at him in confusion, asking if they aren't going to make babies. Flustered, Xenon vehemently denies it, shouting that he has no interest in little girls and that they are absolutely not doing that. He firmly pokes her forehead to get her attention, explaining his true plan. They're going to get her proper equipment, as she cannot enter a dungeon in her current state. The word dungeon catches her full attention. Her face flushes with excitement as she repeats the word. Xenon, now sitting on the edge of the bed, clarifies that he has no interest in making her a sex slave. The sole reason he bought her was to increase his combat power within the dungeon. Her excitement erupts into pure joy. She exclaims that even though she's a slave, being able to go into a dungeon is like a dream come true. With a happy declaration, she announces that she loves fighting. With a blissful, almost savage expression, she eagerly anticipates killing and stealing a great deal. Xenon, observing her intense reaction, asks if her love for fighting is because the Oni are a warrior race. He looks down at a case in his hands, a thoughtful expression on his face. He internally admits that he doesn't know how to react to her saying such frightening things with such an adorable face. Having made his decision, he presents Urza with a vast, glittering mountain of armor, weapons, and various pieces of combat equipment. He opened a case, revealing a collection of gear. He explained that while he couldn't use it himself, he had prepared these weapons and accessories in case a woman ever joined his team, telling Urza to take them. She eagerly accepted. Xenon instructed her to try on the equipment for now, assuring her they could make adjustments if anything didn't fit properly. Moments later, she emerged, now clad in a dark, two-piece combat outfit. Flexing an arm, she declared the new gear to be both nice and comfortable, while Xenon observed her quietly. She had changed with surprising speed, quickly donning the boots and armor provided. Her attention then turned to a massive spike club. She expressed surprise that such powerful armor and weapons could be found in the human kingdoms. The weapon itself was a tyrannical blunt-type club, known for its power to crush enemies, but it required specific blunt weapon skills, a rarity that had left it largely unused in the past. Her eyes gleamed with ferocious delight as she clutched the club. She vowed to put her all into slaughtering her master's enemies, confident she could now face any foe. Xenon chuckled, pleased that she liked her new weapon. Her glee turned into action as she suddenly wrapped her arms around his leg in a powerful hug. Startled by the force, Xenon cried out, asking if she wasn't hurting herself, while questioning her strange, fight-focused excitement. She looked up at him, puzzled by his reaction. Thrown off balance, Xenon became flustered, questioning her intense attachment. He pointed out that they had only just met and that he had done nothing more than provide equipment for their dungeon delves, giving her no reason to be so fond of him. Her confusion persisted for a moment before she explained her reasoning. She was simply happy to belong to such a wonderful gentleman, declaring that her master was cool and handsome. The statement left Xenon completely stunned. He reeled internally, questioning her words. Cool and handsome? Me, he thought. He saw himself as villainous, with sharp, angled eyes and a hawk-like nose. He remembered how girls at school would avoid him, even screaming in terror if he laughed. He wondered if Urza had even gotten a proper look at his face. He stares in disbelief, asking if she seriously means what she just said. Urza enthusiastically confirms, declaring that she does. With a cosmic background swirling around her, she elaborates on her ideal type. A man with fierce eyes that could kill with a glance, a pointy, evil-looking nose, and sharp teeth that could tear through flesh. These features, she exclaims, are straight out of the legends of fierce onigods. She continues her heartfelt confession, stating it must have been fate for her to be bought by such a lovely master. Urza recalls the moment their eyes met at the auction, thinking he was a wonderful gentleman, and professes it was love at first sight. This barrage of praise leaves Xenon utterly stunned. He internally reflects that it's the first time a girl has ever complimented him, and the praise is of such a high order that he feels tears are about to flow. He struggles to process the situation, concluding that while he isn't exactly satisfied, it's better for his female companion to like him than to hate him. With that thought, he decides he's glad. Pushing his feelings aside, he abruptly tells Urza that if she's done changing, they need to get going. As they exit the room, the auction house manager, Lespald, watches them go. He remarks that their business was brief, but notes Urza's affectionate demeanor, adding that the young master seems as potent at night as the boss. Urza happily follows Xenon, whose emotional fortitude has been so damaged it feels as if his very life force has dropped to a single point. The manager bows deeply, addressing Xenon as young master, and promising to gather more good slaves for his next visit. Xenon, too exhausted by the ordeal to argue, dismisses the man's misunderstanding, telling him to say whatever he wants. Leaving the auction house behind, the pair walks down a quiet, cobblestone street. The city is dark, with only the glow of street lamps piercing the gloom of the overcast night. As they proceed, Xenon feels a sense of relief, noting that the annoying stares from onlookers are gone at this late hour. He calculates that the walk home will take about an hour and resolves to get there before sunrise. Behind him, Urza hops along like a bunny, seemingly unburdened by the massive club she carries. Her cheerful skipping brings her right up behind him. She reaches out and gives a small tug on the back of his coat, softly calling out, "Master." He turns around to face her. With her large club resting on her shoulder, she looks up at him with an expression of pure, innocent concern and asks, "Huh? What's wrong?" Her simple question shatters his composure completely. His eyes fly wide open in sheer, unadulterated shock. As he stood frozen in shock, elsewhere in the darkened city streets, a trio of menacing figures gathered. Their silhouettes were cast long by the streetlights as they brandished crude weapons, their intentions clearly hostile. Moments later, these thugs, now part of a much larger group, close in on Xenon and Urza, blocking their path on the cobblestone street and surrounding them completely. From the crowd of thugs, a familiar, portly figure emerged. Well, we meet again," the man declared. Xenon, recognizing him from the auction, coolly acknowledged the ambush and complimented their work. The wealthy bidder's face twisted into a smug, malicious grin, savoring the confrontation. He jabbed a finger towards Xenon, incensed. He shouted, asking if Xenon didn't remember him, finding it unbelievable that someone who paid 12 million wouldn't recall a pebble on the side of the road like himself. Xenon, however, simply asked who he was again. The young man's dismissive tone continued as a thought suddenly struck him. "Ah," he said with dawning comprehension. "So it was thanks to you that I ended up spending more than I expected." He then looked down on the man with contempt. "So what business does a loser have with me?" He sneered, questioning why the man would even bring along a group of scary friends. Stung by the word loser, the bidder's face contorted. He offered a mock apology, stating that auctions are inherently about winning and losing. With a sinister smile, he then extended an invitation for them to join his fun party. Xenon's eyes narrowed. He realized the man hadn't given up on Urza and had brought his friends to steal her, a plan he found utterly boring. Urza then spoke, stating she had something to discuss and asking if it was all right to steal the pseudo-human. She offered a chilling ultimatum. If they handed her over nicely, they would get away with only broken bones. The full scale of the ambush became clear. Xenon and Urza stood calmly in the center of a wide circle, completely surrounded by the bidder's armed thugs, who brandished pipes, bats, and knives, ready to attack. He stood unflinching as the wealthy bidder, his face a mask of desperate greed, demanded that Urza be handed over. Surrounded by a gang of thugs, Xenon simply offered a daring smile, his mind coolly assessing the situation. What to do here? He mused to himself, completely unfazed by the threat. As the auction crowd mills about, Xenon turns to the wealthy bidder beside him. He casually asks about the term pseudo-human, which Urza had just questioned nearby. The bidder, sweating slightly, confirms it's a common word in his country and seems surprised it isn't used here. Xenon looks on with a sharp, calculating gaze, remarking that perhaps it's just him. Nearby, Urza clenches her fist around her club, her mind racing with indignation. She silently questions who could have ever decided that demi-humans were inferior beings. Her thoughts are interrupted as Xenon steps forward, flatly refusing the bidder's previous offer. He declares that Urza is his woman and he will not hand her over. Urza is visibly moved by his words. The bidder's pleasant demeanor shatters, his face contorting with rage. He snarls that he had wanted to resolve this peacefully, but now threatens to kill the undisciplined brat on the spot. He boasts of his high status and vast financial resources, noting that while Xenon may also be a noble, this will not end well for him. The bidder reveals his true ambition. By offering a rare pseudo-human like an Oni to a certain powerful individual, he will secure a position as that person's right-hand man and ascend to even greater heights. His theatrical tone and exaggerated movements suddenly trigger a memory for Xenon. A realization dawns on him as he stands with Urza clutching his coat. He knows this man, and he recognizes that he must be from the Kiran kingdom. Putting the pieces together, he confronts the bidder directly. He asks if the person he serves is Zajataros, the marshal general of the Kiran kingdom. The bidder freezes, his face a mask of pure shock and disbelief. Xenon's mind flashes back to his knowledge of the game Holy See. He recalls that the bidder and Zajataros are enemy characters, though he can't remember this specific man's name. Seeing the bidder's stunned reaction, Xenon smirks and asks, "Spot on, huh?" The man can only stammer, demanding to know how he could possibly know that. He remembers more of the grim storyline. General Zajataros is a depraved man who collects young demi-human girls. In that timeline, Urza becomes his slave and suffers a horrible fate, imprisoned in a vast hall filled with cages of other captured girls. The full picture becomes clear to Xenon. The bidder offers Urza to Zajataros, and this act is the merit that earns him the position as the general's aide. He also recalls that the protagonist of the Holy See game eventually saves Urza, and they become companions. Understanding everything, a refreshed, sinister smile spreads across Xenon's face. The bidder, still flustered, demands to know how Xenon is aware of his excellency. Crossing his arms, Xenon coolly dismisses the question, stating that he has no obligation to tell him anything. His revelation sends the wealthy bidder into a rage. With his identity exposed, the man declares that Xenon will die right there and then. In response, Xenon simply smirks, remarking that a fight is right up his alley. Though he does understand why a noble from the Kiran kingdom is present, he proclaims he will happily strike back as the thugs charge him. He reflects internally that he has once again meddled in a scenario from the game Holy See. Still, he reasons that reducing the number of enemies won't do any harm to the protagonist's journey. With that decided, he turns to Urza, announcing that it's time for her first job and telling her to ready her weapon. He calls it a small thank you for letting him acquire her. Her face, which he notes is adorable, lights up as she eagerly agrees. Though Urza is ready for battle, her expression that of a true warrior, Xenon instructs her not to move just yet, but to cover his rear. She pouts, disappointed at having to wait, as he summons an item, a grimoire of dark magic. Seeing the ominous book, the wealthy bidder screams for his men to kill Xenon. But it's too late. Xenon is already chanting, his eyes glowing as magical runes materialize in the air around him. With a savage cry, he unleashes the dark element area of effect magic, shouting its name. Blood carpet. The ground instantly erupts in a forest of sharp, dark spikes, impaling the charging thugs. Their screams of agony echo for a moment before they fall silent. In the aftermath, Xenon looks at his hand, feeling sick. He thinks to himself that it's a brutal spell, just like the torture magic his father used, and wonders why dark magic must be so gruesome. Shaking off the feeling, he turns to Urza, noting that only the men behind them are left. Her eyes gleam with excitement. Declaring that she's been waiting for this, she vows to slaughter every last one of them and leaps forward to attack. She descends upon the first thug, swinging her massive mace with a battle cry. The man, along with the wealthy bidder, can only stare in disbelief at the sudden, ferocious assault. The thug barely manages to raise his own spike club, which shatters on impact with Urza's weapon. The force of the blow sends the man flying backward. Watching from the side, The wealthy bidder curses the small girl, calling her a monster. As the first thug is dispatched, another leaps from a rooftop, sword raised high, shouting a curse. The wealthy bidder looks on in shock as Urza calmly glances up to meet the new threat. Instead of dodging, she catches the descending blade between her bare hands. The wealthy bidder screams at her to let go, his face a mask of horror. Her grip tightens, and with a shriek of stressed metal, the steel sword shatters in her hands, sending dark, bat-like fragments of energy flying. Her attention turns to the final thug, who cowers and begs for his life. Urza, a small smile on her face, informs him that she cannot spare him. She must slaughter her master's enemies. With a finger to her lips, she playfully declares that he is the last one left. From a nearby rooftop, Xenon watches as Urza launches herself like a comet toward the final target. He smirks, noting to himself that she is as strong as he expected. Moments later, the battle is over. Urza appears before Xenon, proudly announcing that she is all done. He praises her with a good job and pats her head, a gesture she clearly enjoys as she smiles contentedly. His praise given, Xenon turns his attention to the lone survivor cowering on the cobblestones. The wealthy bidder stammers, pleading for him to wait. Xenon calmly informs him that his buddies are gone and then coldly asks what he should do with him now. He looms over the terrified bidder, who desperately tries to leverage his status as a noble from the Kiran kingdom, warning that killing him would create a diplomatic incident. Xenon is unmoved, stating that the incident had already begun the moment the bidder attacked him. He coldly remarks that the man should have simply accepted his loss at the auction. Now, Xenon declares, he will do the exact same thing the bidder had planned for him. Dispose of his body and destroy the evidence, so no one will ever find out. As he considers this, a chilling realization dawns on him. He had been naturally assuming he would kill the nobleman all along. He reflects that he has already killed 3 people with his magic, and even though this is his first time taking a life, his heart feels completely cold. He feels practically no guilt whatsoever, as a monstrous, shadowy form rides in his mind. He questions himself, wondering if this means he has completely become Xenon Baskerville in both body and soul, or if perhaps this cruelty was always a part of him, which is why the original Xenon chose him. Below, the bidder prostrates himself, begging to be spared and offering as much money as he wants. Xenon glances at Urza and casually remarks that he isn't short on cash, before giving her a simple, affirmative command. In response, Urza hoists a heavy, spiked mace above her head, looming over the screaming nobleman. She calmly states that she will wait. She glances back with a slight, her expression one of simple readiness. The bidder's face is a mask of pure horror. With a cheerful cry, Urza shouts, "Ready, set, go." The mace descends with brutal, final force, crushing the nobleman's head in a spray of gore. Urza looks down at her work and murmurs, "Oh my." A moment later, Xenon's expression sharpens. He abruptly calls out, ordering Urza to come back. He realizes with a start that he failed to detect an approaching presence. She responds with a surprised, "All right," and turns to obey. Xenon's mind races. He reasons that if he alone failed to notice, it wouldn't be so alarming, but the fact that even Urza, a member of a warrior race, also didn't sense anything is deeply troubling. He and Urza now stand defensively, scanning the empty street. Where are they?" Xenon demands, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. A calm, disembodied voice answers from the shadows, addressing him by his full name and telling him there is no need to be wary. He looks up from the cobblestones, pinned beneath the boot of the mysterious figure who had appeared from nowhere. A shadow has emerged from the black of night, a powerful foe cloaked in darkness. With his face pressed to the ground, Xenon can only glare up in fury and demand, "Who the hell are you?" As Xenon stands in the alley, a cloaked figure approaches, thanking him before being questioned about their identity. The figure introduces themselves as a member of the Assassination Corps under Master Baskerville. Xenon internally questions if this is one of his father's subordinates sent for surveillance, but the assassin clarifies they were entrusted with this task by Lesbold. The assassin explains that it is quite common for high-profile customers to be attacked on their way home from the auction. Because of this, they are tasked with escorting respected patrons to ensure their safety. They continue, noting that auctions are not just a method of commerce with high entertainment value, but also a venue for the powerful to flaunt their financial might. Xenon listens intently, taking in the information. He processes this, realizing that by purchasing an expensive slave without bringing an escort, he was essentially inviting robbers to attack him. As this thought crosses his mind, the assassin kneels, observing that an escort was clearly not needed. They praise Xenon's capability, declaring that the future of the Baskerville family is in good hands. He ignores the compliment, turning to Urza and telling her it's time to go home. Internally, he scoffs at the praise, thinking he has zero interest in being evaluated as his father's successor. The assassin remains kneeling, bidding him a safe journey and offering to dispose of the corpse of the man Xenon had just killed, telling him to rest assured. With the situation handled, Xenon and Urza walk away into the night. The assassin watches them depart, thinking to himself that they look forward to meeting the successor of the Baskerville Hellhound again. Later, back in his room, Xenon collapses onto his bed, fully dressed, and lets out a heavy sigh. His mind races. It has only been 2 weeks since he arrived in this world, and today was the first time he had killed someone. He feels it was necessary and doesn't regret it. Yet he finds it abnormal to have committed murder so easily. He wonders if he was always this ruthless, or if he is being influenced by occupying the mind and body of the original Xenon. He lay in his room, wrestling with a profound question. What was wrong with him? Despite having just committed murder, he felt no guilt. He recalled his recent past as an ordinary working-class man from Japan, a life starkly different from his present. While he could understand a member of a combat-oriented race like Urza killing without remorse, his own apathy was unsettling. He clenched his fist, forcing a resolution. If he remained hesitant, he would never survive. Therefore, regardless of the reasoning, he decided he should be happy about this newfound capacity for ruthlessness. His thoughts turned to the future enemies he would inevitably face beyond the monsters of Danbury, evil cultists, pirates, and other criminals. He resolved to look at things positively. A lot had happened, but he now had a reliable companion. His ability to defeat enemies without hesitation was a definite strength in combat, and with Urza by his side, he could finally explore the dungeon. He sat on his bed, contemplating his strategy. No matter how much game knowledge one possessed, playing solo in this world would eventually lead to hitting a wall. With the powerful Urza, his chances of survival had increased significantly, but a 2-person team was still unbalanced. Ideally, he needed a magic user and a healer. He decided there was no need to rush. The scenario was still in its early stages. Just as he settled into his thoughts, the bathroom door burst open and Urza, covered head to toe in soap suds, cried out for her master. Her bare feet slipped on the soapy water that now slicked the wooden floor. She tumbled forward, crashing directly into a startled Xenon. As she fell, she wailed that her eyes hurt and that a maid was bullying her. Suddenly, another woman appeared, wrapped only in a towel. She angrily demanded to know what Urza was doing, running to the young master like that. Xenon, stunned by the sight and with a sudden nosebleed, stared in shock. The maid grabbed Urza, trying to pull her away while scolding her for not letting her finish washing the soap out of her hair. Urza continued to cry that her eyes hurt. Caught in the middle and now completely soaked, Xenon realized that the Oni race must not use soap. Urza must have kept her eyes open the whole time. The chaotic struggle sent them all tumbling to the floor. Lying beside him, the maid looked at Xenon with a playful glint in her eye and asked, "Young master, why don't you get in the bath as well?" Her hand gently cupped his cheek, causing his eyes to widen in shock at the sudden, intimate gesture. She teased him, asking if even a master like him could get embarrassed. He stammered a denial, his mind racing. Judging by the maid's reaction, he wondered if the real Xenon regularly bathed with another maid, Leviena, and if their relationship was deeper than he knew. He quickly rationalized the situation to himself. It wasn't that he wanted to bathe with them. He reasoned that he was only doing it to prevent his true identity from being revealed. A sudden refusal might seem out of character for Xenon and arouse suspicion. Totally. Having steeled his resolve, he agreed to go. In response, a delighted Urza threw her arms around him in a tight hug, causing him to let out a pained grunt. Moments later, in a large tub, his discomfort only grew as Urza began to gently wash his hair, leaving him blushing and flustered. The 3 of them soaked in the bubbly water. From her spot, the wavy-haired maid gave Urza an encouraging wink and a thumbs up, signaling her approval. After the bath, a sleepy Urza, now in striped pajamas, declared she wanted to sleep with her master. The maid immediately shot down the idea, telling Urza her own bed was being prepared. Urza cried out in protest, while Xenon looked on, surprised by the maid's firm intervention. A compromise was apparently reached. He ended up in his large bed with the maid sighing contentedly on one side and Urza murmuring in her sleep on the other. He lay awake, panicking internally, wondering what kind of trial this was and how he was possibly supposed to sleep. The next morning arrived. That night had become an unforgettable memory. He awoke with a jolt, mentally screaming his innocence to the heavens, swearing he hadn't done a single thing to either of them. He lay exhausted between the 2 peacefully sleeping girls, staring at the ceiling. He wondered with weary resignation if every single day was going to be like this, pleading for just a moment of peace. He lay awake, his mind racing. Trapped between the 2 sleeping figures, he wondered what would happen if he simply gave in and made a move on the maid, Leviena. How would Urza react? Would it be with curiosity or with repulsion and fear? He internally panicked, reminding himself that he had no idea how to respond even if she initiated something. He had purchased Urza to boost his combat power. He had no interest in cuddling a little girl. His gaze shifted to Leviena. He began to question her age, wondering if perhaps she only looked young. His internal conflict reached a fever pitch. For a moment, he considered letting momentum take over, rationalizing that she might be of an acceptable age. He immediately recoiled from the thought, cursing his sleep-deprived mind for short-circuiting. Just then, both Urza and Leviena began to stir, waking up and greeting him as their master. He looked over at Urza, who had fallen back asleep, and felt a wave of relief. She was, without a doubt, just a child. There was no way she could be of age. His attention was then captured by Leviena, who was now sitting up beside him. "Good morning, young Master Zenon," she said softly. "Did you sleep well?" He could only groan in response. He screamed internally, his face contorted with frustration. Obviously not. Later, after they had gotten up, Leviena served breakfast. Now in her full uniform, she informed him that she would attend to the morning preparations and asked him to wait. Now dressed in his academy uniform, he stood before the building's entrance and called to Urza. "We're heading out," he announced. "We're going to the academy now, but you remember what I told you last night, right?" She beamed, striking a determined pose. "Of course. I won't make a fuss, scream, or throw a tantrum." He smirked, pleased. The decision had been made from the start to bring Urza to school with him, a common practice for the nobles and royalty who attended the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic with their maids and attendants. He considered the new reality of his academic life. The school curriculum would now involve dungeon exploration and monster hunting beyond the city's walls. Because of this, he had to bring Urza along, as she would be entering the dungeons with him. As they walked towards the waiting carriage, he laid down rules. He warned her sternly that any trouble at the academy would result in her being banned from the school grounds. Urza, her eyes sparkling, eagerly agreed, promising to be on her best behavior so she could remain by her master's side. The maid, Leviena, saw them off, wishing them a safe journey as the carriage pulled away. From inside, he watched the estate shrink into the distance, feeling a sliver of reassurance. Since Urza had declared her intentions so clearly, he thought it was safe to assume she wouldn't cause any problems. Beside him, Urza pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide with wonder at the passing city. Her wonder quickly turned into a cheerful, if slightly off-key, song. The protagonist sat opposite her, arms crossed, his expression unimpressed by the impromptu performance. She sang with pure joy, her simple lyrics celebrating the fact that she was going to school with her master. He, however, remained silent, his patience visibly thinning. Her attention then shifted to the scenery outside, her song changing to marvel at the sheer number of houses they passed. He watched her, bewildered by the strange tune and her boundless excitement. He finally broke his silence, asking if she was truly having fun. Urza turned from the window, her face beaming, and confirmed with a resounding, "Yes, sir. Fun, fun." Her simple joy did nothing to ease his mind. Instead, a seed of doubt was planted. He wondered if it was really all right to bring her with him. His doubt was immediately amplified. Urza, her eyes wide with a predatory glee and her fangs showing, continued her happy tune with a chilling new verse about killing and murdering. As her disturbing song echoed in the carriage, the Grand Royal Academy came into view. After the long night and this unsettling journey, he was filled with a powerful sense of unease, a premonition of doom. In front of the Grand Academy building, an opulent black carriage comes to a halt. Zenon Baskerville disembarks, followed closely by the small, horn girl, Urza, who hops down the steps with energy. Their arrival immediately draws the stares of nearby students, including Leon Praise and Aerith Centria. The onlookers quickly identify the vehicle. One of the students points out that it is the Baskerville family's carriage, confirming the identity of the imposing young man. As they walk through the grounds, a wave of whispers follows them. The students murmur about Urza, noting that she is a demi-human slave with horns and a collar. Zenon's expression tightens. He had mentally prepared for an uproar, but realizes he still underestimated how much they would stand out. She, however, is completely oblivious, beaming with excitement. Throwing a hand in the air, Urza joyfully exclaims that this is her master's academy and declares she will lead the way, overjoyed that she could come along. Her outburst causes Zenon to break into a nervous sweat. He quietly tells her to be good and just stay behind him, then pointedly asks if she even knows where the classroom is. They continue their walk across the wide, paved courtyard, a solitary pair drawing the gaze of every student they pass. Watching them from a distance, one of the students remarks on Urza's innocent face, admitting that it makes him deeply uneasy. Urza's background is indeed unusual. She comes from the demi-human continent, a place uninhabited by humans. Furthermore, she is a member of a combat-oriented race, raised for battle. This raises the question of whether she can truly adapt to the social life of the academy. Her concern for others shines through as she notices Zenon clutching his stomach. "Master, are you all right?" she asks, worriedly wondering if his tummy hurts. Zenon winces, internally despairing. He had told her so many times to just act as his attendant, certain she wouldn't cause any trouble. He quickly recovers, patting her gently on the head. "I'm fine," he reassures her, looking towards the academy building. "I was just thinking." He turned to Urza with a stern expression, issuing a clear command. She was to listen to whatever he said, and above all, do nothing that might bring trouble upon him. As he stood with her before the Grand Academy building, he realized an important detail had slipped his mind. Trouble is not always something one creates for oneself. The thought proved prophetic as a sharp voice suddenly called out his family name. Zenon turned, his expression souring as he saw Leon Praise striding towards him, confirming his fear that trouble can indeed approach on its own. His gaze locked onto Urza, and his face twisted in righteous fury. Leon pointed an accusing finger at Zenon, demanding to know who the girl was and how he could put a slave collar on a child. He declared that he had completely misjudged Zenon, calling him a scoundrel. Internally, Zenon recognized him as Leon Brave, the protagonist of the game Yandere 1, an embodiment of justice who would risk his life for a stranger. He continued his tirade, admitting that after Zenon had saved their classmates in the dungeon, he had started to believe Zenon might not be a bad person. Now, however, seeing Urza in chains, he shouted that he should have known better, once again branding Baskerville a scoundrel. As Leon's shouting drew the stares of other students across the courtyard, Zenon clicked his tongue in annoyance. He thought to himself how irritating this oblivious troublemaker was. He internally reviewed his plans. Despite helping with the gargoyle, he had no intention of getting involved with Leon or interfering with the main plot, so long as he didn't try to steal the heroines. According to the original story scenario, Leon was destined to defeat the Demon King and save the world. This unexpected confrontation was a complication he now had to manage. His frustration mounted, coalescing into a single, exasperated question that echoed in his mind. Why was Leon, of all people, getting involved with him? Leon, mistaking Zenon's silence for defiance, yelled at him to set the girl free. Zenon, however, was lost in thought, wondering what Leon's problem truly was. He lamented the vast difference between the game he knew and this new reality, where the unexpected was becoming the norm. Leon's outrage grew, questioning Zenon's shame. Another student chimed in, declaring that enslaving a child was fundamentally wrong, regardless of rules. Unmoved, Zenon addressed the growing crowd. He explained that Urza was legally purchased and that academy regulations permitted attendance. Concluding coolly that he was simply following the rules, he told them they had no right to complain. He internally notes the arrival of another figure, Shell Uranus, also known as Seal. He recognizes her as a paragon of justice, particularly sensitive about matters involving women and children. Leon, seeing Zenon's resolve, challenges him directly, asking if he intends to take Urza away by force. Leon grits his teeth, his righteous anger clashing with the reality of the law. In this kingdom, slaves are legally recognized as property. Forcefully liberating a slave from their master is not seen as a rescue, but as the crime of theft or robbery. Zenon observes this, internally remarking that Leon was always this kind of person, someone who sticks his nose in unnecessary trouble and takes the long way around, wasting time, money, and effort. Changing his approach, Leon asks how much he would have to pay to purchase Urza's freedom. The question catches Zenon by surprise for a moment. He muses that this is just how role-playing game protagonists are, righteous to a fault. In his mind, games are all about enjoying such unnecessary detours. Having made his decision, Zenon places a hand on Urza's head and flatly refuses the offer. He declares that Urza is his slave, his precious subordinate, and his attendant, and he will not sell her no matter the price. He dismisses Leon, telling him to get lost and that he'll see him in the classroom. Leon stands speechless for a moment before grabbing his hair in sheer frustration. He shouts, unable to believe that after everything, Zenon still doesn't understand the moral failing of his position. As Leon clenches his fist, Zenon calmly assesses the situation, thinking that if Leon resorts to violence against a supposedly defenseless person in front of a crowd, he'll be the one who ends up looking like the villain. Before Leon can act, Urza leaps between them, declaring that she will not allow anyone to lay a hand on her master. In a stunning display, Urza launches herself high into the air, a massive, spiked club appearing in her hands as she soars above both young men. She brings the weapon down with incredible force. Leon cries out as he dodges just in time, the club smashing into the stone ground where he stood a second before, shattering the pavement. Her eyes burning with fury, Urza glares at Leon and vows that he won't get away. She proclaims her intent to slaughter anyone who stands as an enemy to her master. Her wild eyes fixated on her target, Urza swings her massive spiked club. Leon throws his hands up in terror, pleading for her to wait and listen, insisting he is only trying to save her. Unhearing, she lets out a battle cry, roaring for his innards to burst as she brings the weapon down. The blow connects, sending Leon flying. As he lies stunned on the ground, Shell Uranus begs Urza to listen, shouting that Leon is not her enemy. Leon himself, through pain, gasps, tries to explain that he only wants to release her from slavery, but her expression remains cold and unyielding. To her, there is no room for discussion. Her implacable fury sends a wave of panic through the student body. They scatter in every direction, terrified of the unfolding violence. Watching from the sidelines, Zenon can only think to himself how scary the situation has become. He snaps out of his detached observation, realizing this is no time to be spacing out. It is a master's duty to stop his attendant. As Urza chants about slaughtering her master's enemies, Zenon rushes towards her, shouting for her to wait, to stop, even commanding her to sit. He grits his teeth, realizing with dread that when Urza enters battle mode, she completely loses track of her surroundings. He wonders if this is what it means to be a berserker. Shaking off his awe, he knows this is no time to be impressed and bellows at her to listen to her master. His shouts do little to calm the chaos. The remaining students cry out in fear, one calling for a teacher, while another urges everyone to run before they get dragged into the fight. Amid the pandemonium, Xenon's focus narrows. He cannot allow the protagonist, Leon, to die here. He resolved that if it has come to this, he must stop Urza himself, even if he gets hurt in the process. He steels himself, preparing for the worst. He lunges forward, shoving his open palm into Urza's chest to halt her momentum. "Chest, get crushed," he yells, bracing for the impact that sent a shock through his own body. His hand slammed down not on Leon, but on the stone floor beside him. The impact, charged with Urza's ferocious power, shattered the ground as Leon stared, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The force of the blow sent Leon stumbling backward onto his knees. All composure lost, he could only sob incoherently, drool dripping from his mouth as his sword clattered uselessly to the side. The deafening crash drew the horrified attention of the other students. One young man with dark hair looked on in shock as Xenon collapsed to the ground below, clutching his arm, which sizzled with residual energy from the deflected attack. Just moments before, as Urza had raised her fist for a finishing blow on the downed Leon, Xenon had lunged forward, shouting for her to wait. The command snapped her out of her rage, but left her in a daze. She looked at her master, blushing as she completely misinterpreted the situation, asking if it was time for them to make children. Xenon could only scream in exasperation for her to stop. Back in the present, Xenon grabbed the confused Urza, admonishing the crazy, out-of-control girl for her happy delusions and the embarrassing scene. As he ordered her to leave, a teacher arrived, demanding to know what all the ruckus was about. The surrounding students could only point in panic toward Leon's still form. The dark-haired student, witnessing the aftermath, bowed low, apologizing profusely as if it were his own fault. A crowd gathered around Leon, who lay face down and motionless. A grim pronouncement hung in the air. The protagonist had met his end. Rest in peace, Leon. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Leon Praise is carried away on a stretcher by two uniformed men. Elsewhere, his classmates discuss the incident. Aricentria explains that Leon suddenly resorted to violence, while Nagisa Saikai adds that the small girl, Urza, protected Baskerville and counterattacked, ultimately proving to be the stronger of the two. The gossip spreads quickly through the academy. As Xenon stands near the entrance, a crowd of students whispers that Leon was likely at fault, having suddenly demanded that Xenon sell his slave to him. A teacher approaches Xenon, informing him that the academy has decided not to pursue the matter since it was a dispute between noble houses. However, he warns Xenon that he also used excessive force and is counting on him to keep things under control. Xenon then turns to a distressed Urza, making her promise not to go berserk again. He vows to speak with the other party as well, and Urza meekly agrees. Later, inside a vast, tiered lecture hall, the students of the academy take their seats for class. Xenon and Urza are present, as are Leon, Nagisa, and Aerith, scattered amongst their peers. A friendly male student approaches Xenon's desk, cheerfully greeting him as Baskerville. He introduces himself as John, reminding Xenon that he was saved by him during the gargoyle incident. Xenon, however, looks back blankly, clearly not remembering the encounter. He walks with John and Urza through the hallway, internally lamenting his fate. He thinks about how Leon is popular, while his own resting villain face ensures he's always cast as the antagonist. Whispers follow them, with students claiming Xenon went on a rampage and that Leon was hurt trying to stop him. Another comments that walking with a cute, collared girl just feels like a crime. John, oblivious, asks if Brave picked a fight with him. John tries to cheer him up, telling him not to let the rough morning get to him. He then observes that Xenon's features are actually decent, making it a mystery why he looks so scary. Annoyed, Xenon tells him to leave him alone, stating there's nothing he can do about his face. John cheerfully replies that he has a similar problem. As John reflects on how rescuing him has dispelled his prejudice against Xenon's lineage, two female students, including Elisa, suddenly swarm Urza. They gush over how cute she is, with one wanting her as a pet, and the other wanting to use her as a room decoration. Xenon angrily demands they let her go, while John hastily explains that Urza is from the demon continent and isn't used to people. The unwanted attention becomes too much for Urza, who releases a small burst of startling energy. Elisa recoils in shock. John quickly explains to Xenon that Elisa simply loves small animals and doesn't intend to treat demi-humans as pets. Xenon's expression softens slightly, seemingly understanding, though still troubled. He reflects on the situation, admitting he isn't entirely blameless as her guardian. Still, he finds it frustrating that the girl now holds a grudge against him, especially since it was Leon who started the fight that caused Urza's rampage. As he broods, John pats him on the back, remarking that a woman's grudge is a terrifying thing. As class begins in the grand lecture hall, Elisa clings affectionately to Urza, who seems annoyed by the prolonged embrace. Urza insists that it's time for Elisa to let her go. Following the confrontation, Leon was absent from the academy the next day and for several days after. The question lingered, could the kick he received have truly caused that much damage? While his physical injuries should have been treatable with healing magic, perhaps the mental shock was too great. In the cafeteria, Xenon reflects on how he's been able to enjoy a peaceful school life thanks to the absence of the annoying protagonist. His friend John notes that a week has passed, wondering if that's too long. Xenon retorts that it will likely take some time for Leon to return, which is only natural for a man in his situation. He glances across the room and sees Elisa glaring at him, as she always does. However, it seems she has no intention of actually approaching or speaking to him. Meanwhile, at another table, Urza sits with Aerith and Nagisa. Both girls kindly offer her their desserts. She reacts with pure ecstasy, not to the sweets, but to a plate of meat. As she eats, Xenon observes that because of Urza, his classmates have started talking to him more, her presence softening the effect of his resting villain face. Nearby students are captivated, calling her adorable. Her enthusiastic eating draws a crowd of fawning students, all eager to offer her more food. They comment that she's cute, like a pet, or a hamster with its cheek stuffed. Flustered, Urza asks them to stop treating her like a child. The day continues at the Grand Academy. Back at Xenon's table, the conversation returns to Leon's continued absence. One student remarks that he would be traumatized too, joking that getting kicked in the crotch by a child might have left Leon unable to have children. The comment shocks another student, while Xenon simply sighs. The student continues, calling Leon an idiot for trying to take away another person's slave. As he listens, Xenon sips his drink, silently admitting to himself that he had the very same thought. He reflects on Leon's character, concluding that he is definitely the type whose sense of justice tends to run rampant. He considers Leon a hot-blooded protagonist who frequently acts on impulse without thinking about the consequences. He continues his internal monologue, acknowledging that Leon's current actions are no different from what his good-natured game counterpart would do. Trying to save an enslaved child is exactly in his character. However, the key difference is that this is reality, not a game. While following one's convictions might seem bold in a story, dealing with such a person in the real world makes them incredibly troublesome. His thoughts turn to the complexities of the world. Reality isn't a simple story that can be split into good and evil. There are plenty of gray areas. He believes that having those areas painted over in black by a hero's subjective whims is nothing but an absolute nuisance. He concludes that Leon is simply too earnest and clumsy. Sometimes, being a functioning member of society means it's better to just turn a blind eye and let things slide. With that thought, he takes a bite of his meal. At the same table, the friendly student John offers a piece of his food to Urza. He remarks that while he thinks Leon is an idiot, he doesn't believe he's a bad person. Urza seems to agree, with a thoughtful perhaps. Her meal finished, Urza leans back, patting her full stomach and declaring she's stuffed. Xenon, seeing the piles of empty dishes, suggests they head out soon. Internally, he expresses a hope that a day will come when they can truly understand each other, a necessary step to ensure they can defeat the Demon King. They then walk down a sunlit academy hallway. Urza skips ahead cheerfully, while Xenon follows a few steps behind, watching her. His attention is suddenly drawn to a scene outside a window. He pauses, noticing John and another male student trying to persuade a reluctant Elisa to join them. The view shifts closer to the group outside. John earnestly pleads with Elisa to join their party, promising she won't regret it. He proposes a trial run for a single quest, where Heath and his friend will be the front line and she can be the healer. Elisa hesitates, voicing her concern about joining a party composed entirely of boys. From a distance, Aerith Centria observes the interaction. She notes the pushy recruitment and identifies the target as the Saint of Centria, an excellent healer known as a cleric. As Xenon watches this unfold, Urza bumps her head into his side, demanding to know what has captured his attention. He was not the only one observing the scene with intense focus. Nearby, Aerith Centria also watched, a sudden realization striking her. She remembered this exact situation from the game's story. It was the pivotal moment, the flag event where she was meant to join Leon's party. Her memory replayed the scene vividly. Leon Praise stepped forward, his expression firm, and declared to the other students that she, Centria, had already decided to join his party. He then turned to her and said, "Let's go." He had taken her hand then, impressed by his courage in that moment. A faint affection had begun to bloom within her, the first step on her path to becoming a promising heroine. This was the event Xenon was watching unfold from the window above. A faint smile touched his lips as he recognized it, musing to himself that it was quite moving to see a key game event play out right before his eyes. His satisfaction, however, was brutally short-lived. A sudden, jarring realization struck him, wiping the smile from his face. He recoiled in agony, clutching his head as if struck by a physical blow. Behind him, Urza, startled by a sudden stop, asked why he had halted so abruptly. At that same moment, Aerith's face filled with dawning horror. She frantically realized the truth. Leon, the hero of this event, was absent today. With the hero absent, the event was thrown into chaos. The students below, including Elisa, were left in an uncertain predicament, wondering what would happen now. The entire situation was in jeopardy, and all eyes turned to what Xenon might do. Outside the academy building, Aerith Centria finds herself approached by a group of 3 male students, with Leon Praise standing among them. One of the students leans in, attempting to persuade the hesitant Aerith. He points out that his father, a count, is on good terms with her father, Viscount Centria, and uses this connection to suggest they should try to get along, even if just for one occasion. From the side, Leon watches the exchange with concern. Reluctantly, Aerith concedes. She agrees to join them, but only for this one time, stating that while it's temporary, she looks forward to working with them. The student is pleased by her response, confirming they will head to the dungeon after school. As she looks down, a faint, curious mark is visible on the back of her hand. From a nearby window, Leon watches the group walk away, aghast. He realizes with dawning horror that they are targeting Aerith, their ulterior motives plain as day. He internally questions what he should do, acknowledging that while they might not try anything immediately due to her noble status, this is a shocking twist. The story's heroine being led away by a minor character. His mind spirals into a panic. He cannot believe she fell not for a major villain like Xenon, but for some insignificant side characters. He imagines his own future falling into ruin, convinced that at this rate, Aerith will never join his party. The situation feels like a total disaster, and he desperately hopes it doesn't escalate into something more troublesome. The weight of his anxiety is visible as he stands in the school corridor, clutching his head in distress. In the background, Urza passes by, but Leon is too lost in his thoughts to notice her. Later, during a free period in the classroom, his friend John cheerfully asks if he wants to go to the sage's playground. Still distracted, Leon declines, stating he needs to go to the training grounds to practice. His gaze, however, is fixed elsewhere. Across the room, he watches with a dark expression as Aerith is once again engaged in conversation with the same 3 students who approached earlier. As he sits with John and Elisa, John suggests their party head to the Cave King's bedchamber, a beginner-friendly dungeon near the city. He notes that with a top-tier healer like Elisa, it should be a breeze. The dungeon is known to be inhabited by rock monsters like golems, and is considered safe, assuming nothing extreme happens. Despite the reassurances, Leon's expression remains troubled. He knows this isn't good. Finally snapping, Leon slams his hand on a desk, shouting that there's no point in constantly worrying. He declares that he'll head to a dungeon by himself. Feeling miserable, just staying put, he decides that going hunting for monsters should cheer him up, and promptly walks away. As Xenon walks through the academy grounds, Urza trots to keep up, asking where her master is taking them. He dismissively states they are just heading to the sage's training grounds nearby, as going far is a hassle. Urza, however, directly questions him, asking if he isn't going to go after the girl from earlier. Xenon flatly denies it, questioning why on earth he would do such a thing. She presses the point, observing that he had a look on his face that clearly showed he was worried about Aerith and wanted to follow her. Flustered, Xenon grits his teeth and admits that she may have a point. Urza notes that for someone who acts so uninterested, he seems to pay more attention to others than she thought. She tells him that if he's going to go, he'd better hurry. Still, Xenon refuses, stating he never said he was going and that it's not certain anything bad will happen. He internally rationalizes his decision. While the students' recruitment of Aerith was pushy and classless, they didn't technically break any rules. He also considers that the Cave King's bedchamber dungeon isn't very difficult, so they likely won't need his help unless they have incredibly bad luck. His thoughts continue, solidifying his resolve not to act. This is no place for a villain like him to step in. The one who saves the main heroine is supposed to be Leon. He cannot be the one to save Aerith and trigger a flag that would turn him into a protagonist who steals the heroine. The turmoil is so evident on his face that Urza looks up at him with concern, asking her master why he looks so troubled. Her question triggers a cascade of internal anguish. Xenon admits to himself that his heart is wavering. He wants to save Aerith, but he cannot make that choice. It's a trauma from the game Yandere 2, where his character's manipulation of Aerith led Leon, who admired her, to resurrect the Demon King out of sheer hatred. He silently laments that he's too much of a pushover and has no right to laugh at Leon, wishing he could just pretend he saw nothing. Meanwhile, Urza watches him, knowingly. She thinks to herself that while she may not be smart, she knows her master is worried and recalls a proverb of the Oni race. If an Oni is troubled, they should just bite into it first. When Xenon asks what that means, Urza explains the proverb's brutal simplicity. Stop overthinking, kill your enemies, and worry about the details later. She suggests that if he really can't stop worrying, he should just find someone he hates and punch them. Xenon is floored by the absolute muscle-brain logic, but finds it so incredibly dumb that it's actually refreshing. He suddenly bursts into laughter, a wide grin spreading across his face. The absurdity of the situation strikes him. Urza's battle-crazed mindset is so simple, so stupid, that it makes all his intricate worrying seem pointless. Patting Urza on the head, he agrees with her, deciding there's no need to stress over scenarios and flags. He resolves to follow her in Leon's example for once, and just act on his feelings, acknowledging that it wouldn't hurt to be an idiot occasionally, especially since Leon is cooped up in bed anyway. Urza beams, affirming her role as his loyal follower. He reasons that no matter what impact his involvement with the heroine has, it's Leon who will ultimately pay the price if the scenario is negatively affected. After all, he considers Leon getting kicked was his own fault, as was missing a key event by taking a break from school. Therefore, he concludes it's ridiculous for him to be racking his brains over it. With his mind made up, he strides forward with renewed purpose, Urza trotting happily beside him. He declares that no matter how things turn out, he will simply do as he pleases. He'll save who he wants to save and crush anyone he doesn't like, embracing his role as the villain. Urza agrees enthusiastically, declaring that simple is best. Urza gives a thumbs up, cheering for her master's decision. Without hesitation, Xenon shouts, "Let's go!" and they leap from the academy grounds, moving with incredible speed. Their destination is a dark cave entrance set into a stone wall on the outskirts of town. Inside, the darkness is absolute, punctuated only by numerous pairs of glowing eyes that suddenly blink open. Inside what he identifies as the Cave King's bedchamber, Xenon confirms their plan with Urza. He now holds a large, vicious-looking spike club, ready for the fight ahead. Urza immediately springs into action, bringing her own spike club down with immense force onto one of the small, rock-like creatures that emerge from the darkness. With a gleeful cry, she shouts for it to be crushed. She continues her rampage, a whirlwind of destruction as she shouts for them to be smashed, crushed, and slaughtered. Xenon watches from the side, a bead of sweat on his brow as he remarks on her brutality, even considering that blunt weapons are effective against these rock-type monsters. After the initial wave is cleared, Urza proudly reports her success. Xenon praises her, then warns her that this is a 10-floor dungeon and the enemies will get stronger as they descend. Urza acknowledges the warning. Xenon smirks to himself, impressed that she could beat Leon to a pulp and still have this much power. He descended the stone steps deeper into the dungeon, Urza trotting energetically beside him. He noted that they still hadn't caught up to Aerith and the others, a fact that suggested her group was actually quite competent. Their descent was abruptly halted by a guttural roar. A massive stone bear, its hide embedded with jagged crystals, loomed before them. Xenon identified the beast, but Urza's eyes lit up with excitement, exclaiming that this one seemed strong. Before he could react further, Urza launched herself forward with a ferocious cry, her greatsword raised to disembowel the creature. But in that same instant, the target vanished completely. With his own sword drawn and a spell crackling in his hand, Xenon was left staring at an empty space, a quiet sound of confusion escaping his lips. With a powerful cry, Urza brings her massive sword down upon a monstrous, crystalline bear. Below, Xenon watches with alarm as the beast, though struck, begins to twitch and stir. After felling the creature, Urza strikes a cheerful pose, relieved. Xenon, however, looks on with a sense of unfulfillment, lamenting that he hasn't had a real fight since the gargoyle and didn't even get to warm up. He turns to Urza, his expression suddenly serious. He commands her to stay back during the next fight until he gives the word. She reacts with wide-eyed shock, protesting that she can't let her master put himself in danger. His gaze hardens as he looks toward another stone bear. He asks if she doesn't trust him, stating that he isn't so weak that he needs her protection for everything. Just then, a second crystalline bear roars, joining the fray. As the first one lunges, Xenon smirks, pleased by the new challenge. Right on time, he thinks. He deftly parries the claws of both monsters simultaneously. A confident grin spreads across his face as he declares that he still remembers their attack patterns. His focus narrows on one of the bears as it lowers its stance. He recognizes the movement instantly as the preparation for its charging attack. The beast hurtles forward, its massive, fanged maw wide open, aiming to crush him. Xenon stands his ground, poised and unmoving. At the last second, he sidesteps the charge and brings his sword down in a powerful arc, shattering the crystalline armor on the monster's back. The beast stumbles forward, stunned. Without a moment's pause, Xenon lets out a fierce battle cry, twisting his body to unleash a decisive follow-up strike against the vulnerable creature. His blade descends in a brutal, multi-strike attack, cleaving through the stone bear's head and torso, ending its life in a single, decisive motion. With both monsters dispatched, Urza looks on with adoration. She asks rhetorically if he sees there was no need to worry, her eyes sparkling as she declares that she knew her master was truly strong. He internally reflects on the victory, noting that while his skill proficiencies are low, his knowledge of the game's mechanics allows him to fight higher-level foes. He muses that defeating stronger opponents will accelerate his growth. Though Urza's praise sounds a bit sarcastic, he admits it doesn't feel bad. Still, he cautions himself against overconfidence, aware that the dungeon always holds the risk of a dangerous encounter. Heeding his own warning, they press forward, arriving at a massive cavern. The floor is a grim carpet of bones and monster carcasses, a testament to the dangers that have been overcome here. They have reached the 8th floor, the Cave King's bedchamber, a vast and foreboding grotto filled with stalactites and the remains of past battles. As they prepare to cross the chamber, Xenon cautions Urza to stay sharp due to the poor visibility. She responds with enthusiastic agreement, hefting her club and promising to slaughter any foe she finds. Suddenly, a shout echoes from the gloom ahead, one a group of fleeing adventurers gleefully announcing they've found something. The unexpected noise makes Urza cry out in alarm, startling Xenon. Their panicked flight originates from a dark, menacing passage deeper within the chamber, for which an unseen threat seems to be emerging. The three adventurers rush past, their faces etched with terror. One curses their luck while another cries out in disbelief, questioning why a certain monster is in this location. Seeing their panic, Xenon points and shouts for them to stop. Ignoring his command, they continue to flee, forcing his hand. He casts Shadow Bind, causing dark tendrils to erupt from the ground and ensnare the adventurers, halting their escape abruptly. He holds one of the captured adventurers by his armor, demanding to know why they are running and, more importantly, the whereabouts of Aerith Centria. The terrified man recognizes him, shouting the name Baskerville. In response, the adventurers frantically explain they had no choice. They were simply exploring the dungeon for items when a powerful, unexpected monster appeared. Xenon listens with contempt, understanding that they ran away by themselves, leaving Aerith behind. He turns his back on them as they plead for him to release them from the binding magic. Calling them morons, he declares their fate is not his problem and summons Urza to depart. She eagerly agrees, and they start to walk away. As they venture deeper into the cavern, he mentions that he has cleared most of the nearby monsters. Their survival now depends on luck. They might be safe until the binding spell fades, or they might be found by another creature. He walks on, internally expressing his disdain for those who would run away and leave a companion behind. His thoughts are cut short as a brilliant light emanates from the cavern ahead, causing him to stop abruptly. From the illuminated passage emerges a colossal creature made of shimmering crystal, a gigant mithril. Nearby, a nun stands defensively before a shimmering hexagonal barrier, her expression one of alarm. Xenon, recognizing the formidable opponent, grits his teeth in frustration, realizing that of all the monsters that could have appeared, it had to be this one. He begins to manifest a dark blade. He instructs Urza to buy them some time, warning her to focus only on dodging. "Yes, master," she replies, leaping forward and shouting to draw the gigant mithril's attention. From the ground, the nun looks up in disbelief, recognizing him as Baskerville Sama. The nun urgently pleads with him to run away, insisting that he cannot possibly defeat the monster. He looks down at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, noting that even in this dire situation, her immediate reaction is to urge others to safety, just as she always did in the game. His thoughts drift to her unwavering nature. She is someone who, if she sees another in trouble, will try to help them, even if it means sacrificing her own life. It is her core belief that her very existence is for devotion and self-sacrifice. She pants with exhaustion, her strength failing after sacrificing herself to let the other adventurers escape. The nun looks back at Xenon, pleading for him and Urza to run away. She insists that at this rate, they will all die if they stay. Xenon stares down at her, his expression grim as she begs him to leave her behind and save himself. His patience worn thin, he seizes her chin and forces a potion to her lips, commanding her to drink. He angrily questions why she is still spouting such self-destructive nonsense. Startled, the nun swallows the liquid, offering a weak word of thanks. Her persistent martyrdom only fuels Xenon's internal fury, and he realizes with irritation that he's about to give this foolish woman a piece of his mind. His frustration boils over as he shouts, calling her an idiot and demanding to know who would ever listen to such a plea. The nun can only stare back, stunned by his outburst. As Urza continues to battle the gigant mithril in the background, a dark resolve forms in Xenon's mind. He understands that to truly save Aerith, to make her value her own life, he must first make her beg for it. He vows to get her to cry out for him to save her, no matter what it takes. As the gigant mithril looms, the nun healer, Aerith, pleads with Xenon, tears welling in her eyes. She begs him not to die for someone like her, warning that at their current rate, they will both be killed. Xenon reacts with disbelief, questioning her phrase, "Someone like me?" He watches her stammer, then erupts, shouting that her self-esteem is far too low. He accuses her of speaking as if her own life holds no value whatsoever. His words trigger a memory, revealing the origin of Aerith's self-sacrificing nature. It lies with her mother. When Aerith was a child, she and her mother were ambushed by a group of bandits. In order to protect her daughter, Aerith's mother erected a magical barrier. This defensive magic, however, steadily consumed her mana over time. As her mother's strength faded, she grimaced in pain, knowing that if the barrier fell, Aerith would be killed. She was determined to maintain it, even if it cost her own life. The bandits are suddenly alerted to the arrival of guards and decide to flee. As they scatter, Aerith's mother, her strength completely spent, collapses to the ground. The memory concludes with a young Aerith crying for her mother in a field of graves. Having survived at such a cost, she began to value her own life lightly, becoming someone willing to sacrifice herself for others. Xenon's voice echoes over the memory, expressing his profound hatred for this kind of self-sacrifice from someone who has a chance at happiness. Back in the present, Xenon demands that Aerith stop making light of herself. She starts to reply, citing her duty as a servant of God, but he cuts her off, declaring that her attitude is exactly what irritates him. He argues that when she denies her own worth, she rejects the people who care about her and the sacrifices made for her, like that of her mother. He yells, asking why she can't understand this, noting that since the protagonist isn't here, he'll say it in his place. He finishes his speech, arms crossed, acknowledging to himself that those were lines meant for Leon. Since Leon wasn't present, he had to say them himself. Aerith stands stunned into silence, her hand covering her mouth as she processes his words. Xenon's resolve hardens. He internally vows that he will not allow the heroine to die, saving someone else, nor will he allow her to be unhappy. To achieve this, he will smash every depressing plot development. He will become a hero or a villain, whatever it takes. His voice raw with emotion, he berated Aerith for her conceitedness. He called it pure arrogance for someone who couldn't even make themselves happy to think they could bring happiness to others, declaring that her life was hers alone and not something to be casually thrown away. He continued his harsh lecture, insisting that a weakling should act the part by crying and begging to be saved. As the gigant Mithril relentlessly attacked Urza in the background, Xenon pressed Aerith, reminding her that she must have her own desires and hobbies, and demanding that if she truly wanted to live, she had to voice it. His words struck a deep chord within her. Tears streamed down her face as she wrestled with a painful question. Was it truly acceptable for her, who had survived at the cost of her own mother's life, to ask someone else for help? Seeing her hesitation, Xenon bluntly called her a moron, declaring that asking for help is the privilege of the weak. He ordered her, as the weaker one, to hurry, lower her head, and beg him to save her. Breaking through her guilt, she finally relented. With tears welling in her eyes, she clasped her hands together and pleaded, "I'm begging you. Please save me." Her plea hung in the air. Watching from a short distance, the gamer protagonist found himself thinking how enviable it was that a beautiful woman looked so pretty even while crying. Xenon, flustered by her words and appearance, turned away in embarrassment. The gamer protagonist sensed that a troublesome flag had just been triggered, but he resolved to ignore it. He then stepped forward, offering Aerith a potion. He told her to drink it to restore her mana, explaining that he would take the monster down and needed her help. Acknowledging the creature's immense power, which had shrugged off everyone else's attacks, he confidently stated that he was different from those who fled and had a real plan. His assessment was proven correct as Urza's struggle continued. Her powerful club slammed into the gigant Mithril, but the attack was utterly useless, failing to leave even a scratch. The gamer protagonist grimly noted that even the Oni's strength was having no effect. He watched the unfazed golem, internally remarking on its incredible toughness, which was just as formidable as he remembered from the game. This gigant Mithril, he knew, was not a creature one would normally encounter. His mind raced, recalling a core principle of the game world. No matter how familiar a dungeon seems, no place is ever truly 100% safe. The game was designed with built-in settings for unforeseen circumstances, including a 0.1% probability of a dangerous encounter. A monster with power far exceeding the dungeon's normal level. He faces the towering, goat-headed beast, a creature known to be of nightmare-level difficulty, possessing skills that could kill in an instant. Turning to the nun healer, he issues a command. Heal Urza, the demi-human warrior. He announces he will begin a magic incantation, but the healer protests, her voice tight with fear, insisting that magic is useless against such a foe. He scoffs at her warning, a sharp sound of dismissal. "Who do you think you're talking to?" he retorts, his expression hardening. He explains that he is fully aware of the creature's properties, that this rare species of monster has a body coated in mithril Oregon. A drop of blood falls from his finger, evidence of a prior clash. His voice rises, cutting through the tension. He commands her to be silent and simply follow his lead, to do the job she was assigned. He reiterates the problem. Mithril possesses a powerful resistance to magic, rendering such attacks completely ineffective. Despite his harsh tone, the nun healer kneels and begins her incantation. A luminous magic circle materializes around her as she casts Exheal, weaving in additional boons. Strength up, guard up, stamina charge, and rabbit's foot. The effects of the powerful healing and buffing magic are immediate. Far across the battlefield, the elf warrior Urza feels a sudden surge of power. Her wounds visibly seal and vanish as she exclaims with renewed vigor that she can still fight. As Urza is restored to fighting condition, the gamer protagonist turns his attention back to the nun healer. He admonishes her for her earlier impulse to step forward and act as a shield, reminding her that her true strength lies in healing and support, and questioning the logic of negating her own greatest assets. She listens to his counsel, her posture softening slightly. But even still, she murmurs, her gaze distant. "I don't want to see anyone get hurt." He counters her sentiment with sharp pragmatism. If someone gets hurt, her job is simply to heal them. Standing at the front and protecting the rear, he states, is the duty of the vanguard. His point made, his focus returns to the overwhelming threat. The massive gigant Mithril and its smaller minions remain unfazed. Both physical and magical attacks are proving almost entirely ineffective. He internally curses the game's developers for creating such an absurd death-on-encounter scenario, then steels himself. Then, he begins to enact his plan, one that relies on a deep understanding of the world's underlying rules. He explains that the game, Yandere, operates not on a level system, but on skill proficiency. A player must first acquire a magic tome, then repeatedly practice the spell to build proficiency before it can be used effectively. He recalls his own frustrations with this grinding process. The spell he is now preparing, he reveals, is one that should be far beyond his current capabilities, hinting at a clever workaround. He recalls the game's fundamental mechanics. Even if a player acquires a magic tome, the spells within are useless if their skill proficiency is too low. The spells simply won't activate. It was precisely this challenging system, however, that he found so engaging. With a confident smirk, he declares that there are 2 ways to defeat the gigant mithril and announces it's time to begin. Before them, the colossal creature stands surrounded by the bodies of other monsters. He explains the first method, a battle of attrition, using physical attacks to slowly chip away at the golem's durability until it is completely depleted. The second method, he reveals, is magic. He clarifies that the common belief that mithril nullifies magic is false. Once the creature takes magical damage past a certain threshold, its armor shatters, and it becomes just an ordinary golem. He recalls that this vital information was hard-won by countless players who share their findings online. With this knowledge in mind, he produces a small vial, a pay-to-win doping bottle, and crushes it in his fist. The item's power surges through him, temporarily increasing all his skill proficiencies to their maximum level. As his companions watch, a swirling vortex of dark energy begins to form in his hand. He announces that he can now command the highest tier of dark magic. As the vortex rapidly expands, he shouts for Urza to get back. The spell manifests as a massive, swirling portal in the sky, Abyss Gate. He knows this is a power only 2 beings can wield, the Demon King and himself, Xenon. The gate's immense gravitational force pulls the gigant mithril toward it. The creature lets out a strangled roar as dark tendrils erupt from the portal, enveloping its body. Under the crushing pressure of the Abyss Gate, the golem's supposedly unbreakable mithril armor cracks and shatters, flaking away to reveal the vulnerable core beneath. Its crystalline body, once impervious, erupts in a blinding flash of dark energy. Shards of mithril fly outwards as the massive golem is utterly annihilated, leaving behind only a small, glowing orb that falls from where its core once was. Witnessing the victory, the elf warrior throws her arms up in triumph, shouting praise for her master's power. The gamer protagonist, meanwhile, slumps with exhaustion, muttering in relief that the threat is handled. His moment of peace is short-lived as the exuberant elf warrior tackles him in a fierce hug. He protests, complaining that his entire body aches from the after-effects of the doping potion he used. He sits on the ground, still held by the elf warrior, while Aerith watches from afar, a blush creeping across her cheeks. A profound realization dawns on her as she thinks of her mother's words. This man, she believes, might be the fated person she was meant to devote her everything to. Unseen by her, a dark, unsettling grin spreads across the gamer protagonist's face. Her thoughts are interrupted as the gamer protagonist cries out in pain from the elf warrior's relentless embrace, who continues to praise his coolness. Startled from her reverie, Aerith approaches and timidly asks if he had just said something to her. She quickly retracts, stammering a denial. It would be a little while longer before he realized that failing to hear Aerith's quiet, momentous declaration was a fatal mistake. Within the crystalline cavern, the remnants of the defeated gigant mithril lay scattered across the floor. The battle was over, leaving only silence and the spoils of victory. As they surveyed the scene, Xenon explained that by collecting special metals, which serve as proof of clearing a dangerous encounter, they could acquire a special item. He noted that the ethereal witch of the watery depths would be the one to exchange them, remarking that the system was just like in the game. With their task in the dungeon complete, he declared it was time to head back. The trio turned and began their trek out of the cavern. Upon exiting, they were confronted by a swirling vortex of wind. Trapped within it were the 2 students who had abandoned Aerith, screaming Xenon's name in terror. The students begged for release, crying out in pain. Xenon watched them, noting that no monsters had appeared. Aerith, however, stepped forward, addressing him as Xenon-sama, and asking if he planned to save them. She explained that she had volunteered to be the decoy, so it was understandable that they separated from her, and thus senseless to blame them. Xenon's eyes widened slightly, surprised she had used his first name. She pressed on, acknowledging that they had abandoned a party member, but insisted that punishing them was the Academy's responsibility. She argued that a student's personal sense of ethics was no excuse to enact vigilante justice. Looking at him with earnest eyes, she pleaded for him to stop, warning that his actions would only tarnish his reputation. Besides, she added, there was no need for someone like him to dirty his hands with such trivial matters. Her reasoning struck a chord. Xenon conceded that she was right. If he were to harm his classmates, he would be condemned by the entire Academy, and the friends he had just made would likely abandon him as well. With a decisive snap of his fingers, the vortex vanished, sending the 2 students screaming as they fell to the ground. Watching the display of mercy, Urza declared that Aerith was truly a saintess for helping such hopeless people. A smirk played on Xenon's lips. Urza, however, quickly grew restless. Admiring a new bag she received, She declared her boredom and her immediate intention to go and smash some enemies. A flustered Aerith stammers an agreement, to which Xenon responds with a casual wave and a simple, "All right." She quickly clarifies that her desire was not to save the students, but to protect the honor of Xenon, her savior. As she speaks, a loud bang echoes from nearby as Urza is struck by an unseen force. Ignoring the commotion, Xenon and Aerith turn and continue their journey, walking deeper into the cavern. The disturbance was merely Urza, who, after swiftly dispatching a group of monsters, is now happily gathering the spoils of her battle into a small bag. Seeing her lag behind, Xenon calls for Urza to come back. He wryly questions her earlier declaration, asking when she became his protector and calling it a cheeky response. From amidst the defeated creatures, she leaps up and shouts an enthusiastic, "Yes, master." She dashes back to the group, proudly showing off her bag, which is now filled with sparkling crystalline items. She excitedly reports to her master that she collected many things. Pleased with her work, Xenon pats Urza on the head and praises her. Overjoyed, Urza leans into his touch, purring with happiness as Aerith watches with a gentle smile. With the party reunited, Xenon gives the order to head back, and they proceed down the long, stone-paved corridor. As they walk, Urza clings to the back of Xenon's coat, staying close to her master, while Aerith walks calmly beside them. As the party proceeds, Aerith walks exceptionally close to Xenon, pressing herself against his side. He reacts with a jolt, his face a mask of shock. His mind reels, unable to process the sudden, intimate proximity. He internally questions if she could keep some distance, but the thought is drowned out by the panicked realization that her chest is touching his arm. She explains that, as a healer, she needs to be protected, so it's better not to keep much distance. She then pointedly reminds him that he was the one who told her to do as she pleases. Xenon internally concedes the point, though he remains flustered by how close she is. He reflects on how this situation came to be, realizing he himself is the cause. He has raised a significant flag with Aerith. He muses that since she hasn't yet formed a party with Leon, it isn't technically NTR, but there's no doubt he has snatched away an event originally meant for the game's hero. Interrupting his thoughts, Aerith asks him a question. She recounts her mother's dying words, to find her fated partner, devote everything to him, and stay by his side, as he would surely be her hero. She then looks directly at Xenon, wondering aloud if he is the hero her mother spoke of. The suggestion sends Xenon into a panic. He internally rejects the notion, thinking it's a joke and that there's no way he could be a hero. He blames Aerith's mother's final words for creating such a massive misunderstanding. His internal crisis deepens as he screams to himself that he is supposed to be the enemy, the one who hunts down the hero and leads the world to ruin. Aerith, however, calmly states that whether he becomes a hero or a villain is entirely up to his own will. Completely flustered by her declaration, Xenon tells her she's talking nonsense. He asks when she changed her job to a fortune teller, angrily stating that he doesn't remember asking for life advice. He gently pushes her face away with his hand. In response, Aerith simply looks back at him, her expression unwavering and a faint blush dusting her cheeks. She presses herself against his arm, her grip firm. Xenon freezes, his face a mask of pure shock. Looking at him with unwavering devotion, she declares him her person of destiny. She vows that if he chooses to live as an ordinary man, she will devote her life to him as an ordinary woman. However, if he becomes a hero, she will become a saintess or a guardian angel to protect him, swearing to remain by his side forever, through sickness and health. Her words, a complete deviation from the game's script, send a jolt of panic through Xenon. He realizes with dawning horror that this entire exchange is new, something he never encountered in his playthroughs. He struggles to regain his composure as Aerith rests her head against his chest. He desperately tells himself to calm down and not to focus on her proximity, while Urza watches them from below. The unexpected turn of events leaves him completely bewildered, wondering how things escalated to this point. His thoughts are interrupted by Urza, who announces she is sleepy and requests to be carried on his back. Sometime later, the group proceeds deeper into the dungeon. Xenon now carries the sleeping Urza on his back, stumbling as he finds it difficult to walk. Aerith moves to his side, offering her support and telling him not to worry. As they continue, a light appears in the distance. Xenon points toward the brightly lit exit at the end of the long passage, identifying it as the completion of another dungeon. Beside him, Aerith softly calls his name. He confirms their success with a simple yep. Leaning against his shoulder, Aerith quietly complains that she is hungry. Her simple complaint seems to break the tension of the moment, and a small, amused laugh escapes Xenon. Hearing this, Aerith giggles softly in response. Standing before the dungeon's exit, his resolve hardens. He scoffs at the game's intended scenario, refusing the role of a character who would steal the affections meant for another. He vows that he will neither let the world collapse nor follow a predetermined path, choosing instead to forge his own way forward. He looked on with a satisfied smirk, reflecting on his recent successes. He would travel wherever he pleased, clearing the path as he saw fit. He had Urza with him, and had even made other friends. And then there was one more person, his newly acquired companion, one of the three main heroines of the story, Aerith Centria. As the thought solidified, he and Aerith emerged from the dungeon into the early morning light. He glanced at the sky, noting that a new day had already dawned. Their path led them back to the grand gates of the academy, where two guards stood their silent watch. Walking alongside both Urza and Aerith, a clear thought defined his existence. After being reincarnated as the villain, his path was only just